Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back today at 4:34 The News. And it's good to see you all once again. And the news has been so busy today, I've put out the most tweets in the history of the channel.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And of course, the last day of news for this week of the war. Tomorrow, the map will be brand new. We'll be covering all of the new bulletins and markers of the next 24 hours of the war. And this is one hell of a way to end the week as a drone flew into the Kremlin and blew up. It actually happened. And we were talking about this, what, Matthew, like 2 weeks ago? We saw the video footage of the Ukrainian drone flying right outside the Kremlin and said, that's a little concerning. I wonder if they're ever going to do anything about it. It looks like they didn't. And so we're going to be moving straight into Moscow tonight and straight into this news because it is absolutely insane. And much like last night, while this is insane, the news from other places on the front lines has also been pretty wild as well. Things are certainly starting to escalate again, or heat up, as a lot of people like to say. And I think, without any question whatsoever, we are entering the next incredibly active phase of the war. Much like the early months of the war, we are entering a new, highly active phase right at this moment. We're going to be starting off with our footage in Moscow on the first clip that was ever seen of the drone attack on the Kremlin. This video camera was placed on a building somewhere up on a higher floor on the other side of the river. Looking over into Red Square, we can see, and let me see if I can show this to y'all, we can see the May 9th Victory Day Parade, I guess you could say, stands have been set up. We can see that there. So, of course, we know that it's the correct date. We can see the drone right up there, and it comes streaking across the sky, right past St. Basil's Basilica, right past the Kremlin clock tower, and right onto the Russian flagpole on top of pretty much the building that everyone associates with the Kremlin. This is the building where the Soviet flag of the Soviet Union last flew in 1991 when it was taken down and replaced by the flag of the Russian Federation as the Soviet Union was collapsing. And it is now the spot of the first ever drone attack to hit the Kremlin and blow up. We also saw in later footage that there were actually two people that were climbing up. You can actually see both of them right there where my mouse cursor is, that were climbing up the steps towards that flag for an unknown reason. But we can see the drone explode there, the smoke billowing away, and moving on into our next clip, we once again saw another angle of the drone attack, this time from the other side of Red Square near the gum store looking over towards the Kremlin fortress. We can see the Russian flag flying right there. We can see the drone flying in, and boom, right on the flagpole. Absolutely amazing. And we can also once again see the two people who were climbing up. Let me show that right there. We can see the two guys right here that are climbing up to the top of the building. And once again, we can see the drone come in and explode.
And what were those two guys doing climbing up toward the top?
That is a great... I don't really know what they were doing. It's a great question. Because some people are saying that they may have been... Like, I actually just saw someone say, the Observer said, they were the drone operators. I doubt that because these guys were on the move the entire time. They were climbing up the steps. But what are they climbing up there for? Obviously, it's not time to replace... I guess you could say replace the flag, because it appears that the flag of the Russian Federation flies over this building almost 24 hours a day. Maybe they were taking it down. I don't really know. We don't know why these guys were climbing up there, though. But we did see, once again, the drone hitting the building. Moving on into our next...
I guess one possibility could be, because Russia said it was taken down by electronic warfare measures, they could have been climbing up there with a drone gun, trying to zap it and, disrupt the signal.
Yeah, but that's a little questionable because they never stopped when they saw the drone. They kept on climbing until it blew up, and then they paused like they didn't really know what was going on. So who really knows?
And also, how'd they have the camera angle like so high definition, like pointed right at that spot?
Oh, I'll tell you why. A lot of people have been bringing that up. The reason being is that this building, and I'll show it on Google Maps real quick, this yellow-colored building with the green dome is, I believe, the building where the Duma holds their sessions. And let me make sure I'm correct in that. So let me let the map refine itself. Come on, map. You can do it. You gotta do it, map. Come on. All right. It's getting better. Dude, I feel like this is a 1990s, Criminal Minds show. Like, zoom in enhance. But anyways, let me zoom in. And this is the Sinetsky Dvorets. Dvorets, which means that this is the building, and I had to make sure before I said it, this is the building where the Duma holds their session. So this building right here is, I guess you could say, the direct family member of, like, the Capitol building here in the United States, or the Parliament building in the United Kingdom. This building pretty much serves the exact same purpose, and that's why there's a camera that was running a live feed on the other side of the Red Square looking at that building, because it's pretty much like a live camera looking at the U.S. Capitol building, at least as far as Russians are concerned.
Oh, well, that's pretty interesting. And they have it aimed like right at the dome, basically.
Yeah, right at the dome. Like, they actually had a camera that had a live feed, I think, although that's really weird to think that there was a live feed in 1991. I'm not really sure how that happened. But a camera was somewhere on this exact spot of the Red Square in 1991 when they lowered the flag of the Soviet Union, raised the flag of the Russian Federation when the Soviet Union collapsed. So this is really actually normal to see a camera looking right at the Seversky Dvorets building. Sorry, I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, but it is actually fairly normal.
Oh, interesting.
But anyways, moving on from that, we also saw some footage from, once again, the other side of the Moskva River, showing the smoke dissipating after the explosion occurred. It appears that this person was woken up by the explosion and immediately started filming the plume of smoke that was in the sky from the explosion of the drone. And we can see that right there. And that's the end of that clip. There's a distortion over here on the right side of the video. We don't really know what the distortion is from, but once again, another bit of video evidence showing the aftermath of the attack. Afterwards, we also saw, this is a pretty wild one, the Kremlin, the Seversky Dvorets building actually caught on fire for a short while. A very small part of the dome did, and we can see this right here. This is from the opposite side, so if we were looking at this building relative to where this camera angle is, the drone came in about right here. It came in over the southern end of the GUM building, flying over the Red Square, hitting the flagpole on the dome of the Sinetsky Dvorets building, and this video footage is being taken from somewhere over here, looking in towards the Kremlin clock tower down here, which you can see on the film right there. And you can see that after the drone exploded, fragments of it actually landed onto the dome of the building and continued to burn, and from what we understand, caused a small fire. Now I gotta say...
And also, I see a lot of folks pointing this out, and we just want to make sure we make it clear. I think the enforcer might have said it earlier, but there were 2 drones, and I see some folks saying that the guys might have been climbing up the dome to inspect the damage from the first hit, and then that second one exploded, which we saw in the video just a moment ago.
And let me make sure that we do correct that. I believe we only have footage of the second drone attack, if I am correct.
Yes, that's the only footage we have. I don't think we have... You know, it's kind of weird. We don't really have footage of the first one.
No, we don't. And I have been finding that kind of weird today, and kind of why I forgot that there even was supposedly a first drone. In my honest opinion, we always work off of video and picture evidence, and there has been no verifiable or discernible evidence of a first drone attack to make this one a second drone attack. Considering that from what we've heard, and let me make sure this story is correct, Matthew, the first drone attack also targeted the same place in the Kremlin, if I'm not mistaken.
Supposedly, although I don't know personally.
So my question is, why in the world would we not see the footage of the first drone attack on any cameras? Because we're only seeing the second drone attack on film.
That's a good point. So, you know, if it's not on camera and they have the cameras aimed right at the same spot, how come there's no video?
Of course, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's a little odd, just to make sure we clarify that there is no video or picture evidence of a first drone attack. There's only picture and video evidence of the aftermath and the attack of the second drone. But still, we can see a fire there burning on the dome of the Sinetsky Dvorets building, and it seems as though a small amount of damage may have been caused. We don't know if the damage was extensive, and we have reason to assume it most likely was not extensive to the building, as from what we understand, the dome of this building is plated with some kind of metal. I don't think it's copper, it's something else, but it most likely did not cause a fire hot enough to start burning anything flammable underneath the metal coating. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip, once again showing the Sinetsky Dvorets on fire, and moving on towards the northern end near the State Historical Museum. Now, interestingly enough, the Russians had a very quick response. I have to say, Matthew, it was absolutely unbelievable to see the response from the Russians today after this drone attack. You see, we saw, if many of y'all were not here for this, we actually saw about a week or two ago that a Ukrainian partisan group flew a drone right by the Kremlin clock tower right here, looking at the Sinitsky Dvorets building, and we said, huh, that's interesting that it got that close. How come they haven't stopped it? And then the Russians sat there and I guess they watched that video too, and then they went, whatever. And then now this drone attack is happening. So now they've decided that the best thing to do is to make sure to prepare for the for push to come to shove and to prepare for the worst. And so what they do is, instead of really trying to help out in any way, shape, or form with anti-drone operations, which appears to be their primary concern right now, they start cordoning off the Kremlin on the ground with barricades. I don't really think this is necessarily going to help the Kremlin, considering that it was attacked by drones and not on the ground, but we can see the cops moving at barricades to try and block off green areas, of I guess parks pretty much, that are around the Kremlin.
This is really going to work good.
Oh, this is going to work well.
Ребят не пускают, да? А как объясняют? Почему? Все, понял, спасибо.
We can see them once again looking at the barricades. We can see the dome up there still intact, of course not heavily damaged by the subsequent fire of the burning drone, and the flag of the Russian Federation still flying. We can now see them lowering the flag later on in the day, and that's the end of the clip. It's wildly bizarre, though, to think that while this is in the daytime, leading up after the drone attack, that the Russian government is still going to act like nothing really happened. Although they were attacked by a drone, supposedly weren't able to stop either of them, and they both hit the Sinitsky Dvorets building. This in, I guess its similarities, would be like a drone running into the Capitol building here in the United States with a bomb attached to it. That would be about the exact same thing, and that would be a massive uproar here in the United States. People would be talking about, how in the world did the security let this happen? This is unbelievable. The Russians, instead of saying anything about how this was a massive gap in their security, they make it sound like the Ukrainians broke a rule. There is no rule in war stopping you from targeting government buildings. And we don't even know if the Ukrainians attacked this building or not. The Ukrainians' official statement is that they were not involved in this attack whatsoever. And from what we understand, that may be a true statement. It may have no reason to question it whatsoever, because we've seen many partisan attacks many other times that did not involve the Ukrainian government officially by any means, or have any planning or coordination on the Ukrainian government's end. And so the fact that the Russians are immediately going and blaming the Ukrainians is pretty wild, to say the least, because who's really to say this, man? Who's to say that this wasn't a terrorist attack by the angry Kadyrovite Chechens because that mosque isn't being built in Moscow? Who's to say that it wasn't for that reason? Who really knows?
It could be that. It could be partisans. It could be disgruntled citizens that simply don't like somebody in the government. It could be anything. And Russia took the opportunity to say it was Ukraine without a doubt, without any evidence whatsoever. But, you know, one thing I find kind of interesting is the drone, when it came in and exploded, it really didn't have enough punch behind it to actually do anything. So I don't see the argument that Russia's trying to make that it was trying to assassinate Putin. Because what, does Putin sleep on the roof or something?
I don't know, and it looks like to me that the drones were attacking the flagpole on the Sinitsky Dvorets building and trying to possibly take down the flag. That's what it seems to be to me. But still, a bizarre occurring of I guess you could say a bizarre turn of events, and certainly once again showing that the Russian military and the Russian government as a whole is pretty much an embarrassment. The fact that they allowed a drone to get this close to the Sinitsky Dvorets, or the Kremlin for that matter, is unbelievable, because even in a country like the United States, there are massive no-fly zones for drones around the White House, Capitol building, and other governmental buildings in Washington, D.C. So it's unbelievable to think a drone was able to even explode over the building, or over the Kremlin for that matter. Speaking of which, we heard an official statement from the Russian government today that due to recent events, Putin has decided just for today that he's going to be working from the bunker under the Kremlin. Just for today. Does anyone really believe that he wasn't already working in the bunker? Like, I think he was already working in the bunker over the entirety of the war. There's no reason to question that whatsoever. That would seem to be a reasonable boon, but they're acting like now Putin's moved to the bunker for this. Honestly, I think Putin's going to be moving out of the Kremlin because of this, and he's going to be going to that little summer mansion he has down near Sochi to sit out the rest of the war. That's honestly what I think. But of course...
Hell, he's even scared to go there with all the air defenses he has around it. But also, one more point real quick. I see everyone saying that there was footage of the 2 drones coming in and hitting the Kremlin. Apparently, we saw both of them just a second ago. One of the videos showed the first one, and one of the videos showed the second one.
Really?
So I saw some folks getting very angry about that, so I just want to make that clear.
One second. Let's go back and look at both of them side by side then, because from what I understood, both of these were from the exact same attack. So let's take a look at them, and let's see what we got. All right, so we're going to the first one here. This is the first one. Well, the first video clip we got. So we can see this drone flying in. And let's take note of where it exploded. So this one explodes under the flagpole and then goes shrieking off in a fireball further on into the Kremlin. So now let's go watch the second video. So second video, once again watching, we see no smoke, we see no fireball, we see another drone come in, and it once again explodes directly under the flag, and then turns into a fireball and streaks its way on into the Kremlin. So, it may be the case that these are 2 separate drones, but it is fairly interesting to see that both of them flew into the exact same spot, took the exact same path, and also exploded in the exact same spot of the flagpole. Either those are some amazing pilots that can get literal millimeters or inches precision in flying their drones into the exact spot, but I think another important thing to note is the smoke cloud. Because while we're seeing it from a different angle, does it look similar? And is it floating off in the same direction? And from what we can tell, hang on, let's take a look at this. So it turns into a fireball, it goes flying on, and the smoke dissipates into a pretty distinct cloud from this angle at that time. So let's go back. Alright, so here's what we can tell. The first video shows some weird little I guess you could say cloud of smoke popping up out of the smoke cloud and up into the air, kind of detached from the rest of it. And while this video is taken at another angle, we can see that weird little detached piece of cloud popping up out of the rest of the explosion smoke cloud at about the same angle. So it does appear that these both are videos of the second drone attack, just because the explosion cloud is the same, and also the place where the drone hit was identical in both videos, just right under the flagpole and a little bit to the right. So it appears that this is, in fact, the exact same drone attack. We only have footage right now of the second drone attack. It appears that, from what we can tell, we do not have footage of the first one. However, if anyone does have footage of a first drone attack, which I have not been able to find on the internet today, please feel free to send that to our Twitter DMs on Twitter. The link is in the description below if you do not have the Twitter. But make sure to send it, because if we are incorrect on that, we would like to correct that right now and show footage of the first drone attack if it is available and if it is out there somewhere. And also another thing I'd like to note that we saw in both videos, and I've got to thank you so much, Driving and Luton, for stating this. The 2 men that were climbing in the first video, which we can see right there, the 2 little specks, are also climbing in the second video. And there's no way in hell that everything's lining up like this, all at the exact same time, where the drone's flying at the exact same spot, they explode the same way, the explosion clouds are the same shape, and these 2 guys are climbing up the Snitsky Dvorets dome again. Too many things are exactly the same in these videos for them to be 2 separate attacks. We are watching the exact same attack occur from 2 different angles. So with that, we're going to be moving on from Moscow, where we've heard massive news today. Of course, we don't really know, and we have not heard whether the Ukrainians were directly responsible for this. The official position of the Ukrainian government is that they had no involvement whatsoever in this attack, and that they take no responsibility for it whatsoever. Once again, that could be completely true. We have seen that partisans have conducted attacks before on the Russian government without being directly involved or directly tied into the Ukrainian government whatsoever. So there is a lot of credibility to that statement, and the fact that the Russians are immediately blaming the Ukrainians for this massive embarrassment is something, to say the least. With that, we're going to be moving on to our last clip from Moscow, where we saw some Russian citizenry with keen eyes seeing another drone flying over Moscow in the daytime. It's a pretty sizable one again, kind of like we saw a few days ago. And nobody knows whose drone it is or where it came from. Honestly, I think the city of Moscow is going to be falling into complete pandemonium here in the upcoming days and weeks after that drone attack on the Kremlin. At least the police are. The police are going to be freaking out in Moscow because now they've shown the Russian government, and the Russian military has shown the Russian government, neither of those two groups can stop the Russian government itself from being directly attacked, hypothetically, by drones. With that, we're going to be moving on into the area of Perm, where we also saw a Russian soldier stealing army donations. Of course, the Russian army is not supported as greatly as the Ukrainian army, even by the Russian citizenry. And we can see that this guy here went up to the tip jar that's pretty much for collecting donations for the Russian army and stole it. Here's the clip. You see the guy here looking at the pastries and the other stuff that's here. I don't know really what this is. All-you-can-eat buffet Russian style. And we can see him staring at what appears to be some kind of a loaf of bread. He's now looking around, and he hangs onto the box for a minute, slowly sliding it around, and then just picking it up. You can see some money there inside, and he just walks out of the store like an absolute Chad. Well, I guess the Russian army is not going with food or ammo this month. It appears that their entire military budget was just stolen off the countertop of this random store in the middle of Perm. Pretty interesting, I gotta say. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip. Once again, showing that the Russian citizenry have about as little care for the Russian army as really anyone else in the Russian government does. It's good to know the Russian army can rely on no one really for support. And with that, we're going to be moving on into the area of Kyiv, where we saw that the Iris Ts, which have been provided by Germany and I believe the United States, I believe it may have just been the Germans, have been defending the skies around the city of Kyiv, and will probably need to be used greatly here in the coming days, since the Russians say that they will retaliate in some way, shape, or form. And we're going to have to mute this because it is playing that country music that makes you sound like Sam Elliott. We can hear the epic music.
Sam.
What you doing with that hot dog, Sam? And we can see them lifting up the Iris T as music plays, showing off the Iris T, and now operating it. And holy moly, I've never seen a surface-to-air missile from any system so far in the war launch this quickly. Watch this, Matty. Dang. And that thing's gone. That thing's fast. This complex is reliably destroying air targets and approaching our responsibility zone. Operators are composed of officers. After the operation, the service of locators and service stations immediately leave the shelter and watch the world. Man, that sounds kind of cool, watching the world. Only the service that conducts combat operations remains. More music plays. Have you ever wanted to defend your airspace? What we see on our radar, we can share this information with neighboring, let's say, missile complexes. And they can already fire on these or other targets according to our data. The feeling of the first launches, the first work, is quite impressive. The day of the first application of the complex was a very big impression on everyone. In the first place, the call to destroy all targets. More music plays as we watch the Irish T launching its missiles into the sky, and the Ukrainian operators who are constantly defending the skies around Kyiv, and of course going to an award ceremony. You see right here the patches. Air ST showed a very different appearance, although you can see the indicators that no enemy air targets do not reach their destination, and we can see the remains of some of the air targets that they shot down. We can now see the Iris T moving along its way. You hear more music playing. You see them once again firing the Iris T in the middle of pretty much blizzard-like conditions. Someone's about to tell us I lived in Alaska. That's not a blizzard. I'm sure it's not. But we can see it firing off its missile again, and it is on its way. The Iris T, while having an amazing acceleration in its launch compared to other surface-to-air missiles, does have a limited range. It only has a range of about 16 to 17 miles. 17 miles is really pushing it. But it is an amazing air defense system. It is a little bit expensive, however, but it certainly provides that extra needed air protection wherever the Ukrainians need it, and hopefully here soon, if the Russians ever do launch a massive onslaught missile attack against the Ukrainians, if they even have that kind of ammunition available, these IRSTs will be able to intercept those missiles and shoot them down with fairly high accuracy, making sure that as many Ukrainian citizens as possible are saved from the most likely oncoming slaughter. We're now going to be moving on from the IRST and on into the area of Belgorod, where we saw that the Russians have tried to retaliate, at least in small form, today by launching shaheds, and y'all know the puns made about that, but launching shaheds in response to the supposed Ukrainian attack on the Kremlin. Here's the clip.
Damn. I didn't know they launched like that.
Yeah, I didn't know they launched like that either. That was a little bit of a surprise to me when I watched this video today. Dude, these things literally get launched like V1 doodlebugs in the Second World War.
Yeah, seriously.
Man. Wait a minute, hold up. Wait a minute, did you see that? Was it just me? Wait, hang on. Look, watch, there's the drone. It's got a little bit of light flickering on it, and it disappears. And then we see a light right there, and it looks like the shahed is nosediving into the ground. I can't tell if that was the shahed or not, because you can't really see it anymore. It just disappears. But we saw a little glint of light, and it looks like that thing was spiraling into the ground.
Man, those Iranians, they know how to make a good piece of equipment.
Jeez, man, you wouldn't want to launch one of these near the front lines because you would give away your position immediately. These things are lame. And really, honestly, it surprises me that it's launched by like some kind of a rocket-assisted motor, because usually we see that they're launched by some kind of a catapult. Apparently the Shahed is such a poor build that the engine can't provide enough acceleration on its own with a conventional catapult, so they have to give it a booster rocket to get it off the ground. I actually never have seen this before in action and at night, and it's pretty wild to see. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip in Belgorod and on into our location unknowns. But before we get into those location unknowns, Matthew has run some incredible polls. They're actually really interesting. I want to make sure we cover them real quick. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the very first poll we have says, who do you believe carried out the attack on the Kremlin? It looks like 48% said it's a Russian false flag, 11% said unsure, 33% said it was partisans, and 9% said it was Ukraine. And I'll be completely honest on this one. At first, I thought it was probably a false flag attack by Russia, but I'm beginning to think it might have been partisans. The attack itself really doesn't look very strong. It's really weak, and it doesn't make much sense to me. They went for the flagpole. I know some folks are saying, well, that's a target, but I don't think that was the target. I think they were trying to go for something else, and it just happened to hit the flagpole because the impact actually happened on the dome of the roof. And those drones aren't that hard to fly. So if you're trying to hit the flagpole, you could probably hit it. But I'm going to say it's partisans. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm honestly going to have to say that I'm unsure. It could have been a false flag by the Russian government. A lot of people have pointed out that these did look like Lancet drones. They kind of did. But many drones do look similar, so it may have also been partisans as well. We can't really tell, to be honest with you. And so I would have to say that, in my opinion, I would be unsure at the moment, and I have to wait for further information to come out or better video and picture evidence to really get an idea of who actually launched that attack. Because right now, it could have been anyone's attack. So with that,
And also, even if it was partisans, that still allows Russia to use this essentially as a false flag, even if they weren't the ones actually perpetrating it. So, either way, they achieved the result.
that is true. I would agree with that 100%, because we already know the Russians are absolutely tweaking over this attack, and they're going literally mental. But with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, let's see here, Russia says they plan to respond to the alleged attack by Ukraine on the Kremlin, and what will it be? 44% said none of the above. 26% said an attempt of assassination on Zelensky. 21% said full mobilization on May 9th. And 9% said tactical nuclear weapons. And if y'all have been on Twitter at all today, you'll have seen a big incident involving rumors about nuclear weapons being used. As of this point right now, there is no evidence that Russia is planning to use nuclear weapons, and it appears to be just that, and it's simply rumors. So a little bit of fear mongering going on there to an extent. I would honestly say, sadly, I think Russia is going to attempt to assassinate Zelensky. They're not going to send in hit squads like they did at the beginning of the war. They're going to try to target the administrative buildings or somewhere where he's sleeping and he's residing. And right now he's out of the country, but that's our next poll. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, in my opinion, the Russians are probably not going to be able to do a lot, honestly, to try and curb or counter what the Ukrainians did. They can launch another cruise missile attack because of it. Russian doctrine does not allow them to use nukes, I guess you could say, offensively. Their nuclear doctrine, much like everyone's in the world, is retaliatory. So if they're attacked with nukes, they attack with nukes. And while we've always heard that they're always waving around a nuke in the background, they know as well as everyone else what the actual implication of using a nuclear weapon in Ukraine would be, even if they do violate their own nuclear doctrine and actually use them offensively. The United States would most likely get involved because that kind of precedent that the Russians would be laying out, that the person with the most nukes and any neighboring countries that don't have any have to be subject to their will, means that any nuclear country in the world will be running around and using their nuclear weapons as a sword to bring people onto their side, or else they cease to exist. And that's something that the U.S. couldn't stand for. That's really something that no country in the world could stand for, because it creates a very volatile situation, and one that most likely wouldn't last too long. So I have a feeling that while we're seeing a little bit of activity over there, which we see all the time here in the United States, as far as I understand, there are B-52s that are airborne right now, and they've been airborne for decades, nearly, that are ready to use nuclear weapons. There is always I believe, if I'm correct, there is also always a doomsday plane that is constantly flying as well. And once one lands, another one goes up if it ever has to come back down. There is constantly nuclear readiness. And so the Russians having nuclear readiness as well isn't exactly anything new, at least in terms of Cold War doctrine, but it is concerning nonetheless. I don't think that they'll use them. We've seen that so far many things have happened to the Russians, and everyone's always saying that the Russians will use nukes as soon as something goes south for them, but just about everything at this point has gone south for them. And so I just don't think that nukes are going to be on the table, because they've never been on the table yet. Now, mobilization and other things similar to that, now I could see that. Because this is something that makes it seem, even if it wasn't committed by the Ukrainians, the story that the Russians are immediately spinning is that it wasn't attacked by the Ukrainians. Although that's stupid that they had attacked the flagpole of everything. They actually could have rammed it right into the building and probably killed a few people if they wanted to do it. But we'll probably see.
Would that weak bomb, you think they could have gotten people?
Oh, sure. They probably could have killed at least one or two people in the Sinitsky Dvorets building if they aimed at a window. I mean, there's no question.
Man, they would have had to get extremely lucky that somebody would be in the exact room, because that bomb was weak, like very weak.
Yeah, no, like the whole thing was kind of weird. That's why I say, to actually revise what I said earlier on a poll, it's up in the air as to who it really was, but the Ukrainians are certainly out of the picture, because it would make no sense for the Ukrainians to use such a small bomb and aim it at the most insignificant part of the Kremlin, which is the flagpole. I mean, rather than it being symbolic, there's nothing to that flagpole that's going to change the war. Like, if they blow it up, then what? You know, they replace the flagpole in like a week and everyone moves on. It wouldn't really change anything. So why in the hell would they do that? They wouldn't. It would make no logical sense. So obviously they didn't do it. That's just pointless to do. But I would say, moving back to this poll, mobilization or a massive missile attack, if they even have enough missiles left for a massive missile attack, is probably in the future because of this. I would think it will be one or the other. So with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And Kaltenberg said, Andrew, no Russian stands by windows anymore. And they might have learned their lesson by now. If you're not going to fall out of the window, you're now going to get exploded by a drone flying by your window. So at this point, windows are going to go out of style in Russia.
Dude, man, there's going to be one lucky Russian out there in Moscow that is being like pushed towards the window by the FSB, and he goes, wait, guys, wait, don't do it. And he's going to hear behind his head, and he's going to duck just in time for the drone to fly over him and get the FSB, guys. It's going to happen at some point. But still, with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and our third poll says, Ukraine's press secretary has said that Zelensky does not plan to immediately return to Ukraine, and what are your thoughts? 46% said it's a smart move right now, 17% said unsure, 6% said, I think that's a little weak, and 31% said it's not connected to the drone attack. And just for some context, Zelensky made an unannounced visit right before the drone attack in Russia was announced, and he went to Finland. He's been in Finland all day, and he's now arrived over in the Netherlands, and he plans to give a speech at The Hague tomorrow on Thursday. So his press secretary has said he's not going to return immediately, so it's unclear exactly what that means. He might stay out of the country for a little while, and for me personally, I think it's a smart move, and I think it is probably connected to the threats coming out of Russia, because they're probably concerned that they're going to try to get him on the way back into Ukraine. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of move they make next to safeguard Zelensky. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that Zelensky is going to be going back to Ukraine. It may be something similar, because this isn't the first time that Zelensky has visited multiple countries on his way out of Ukraine. Like, for example, when he visited the United States, he did on his way back once again visit Poland. So it is not out of the question that this was just a part of the itinerary, and the fact that this happened was just a coincidence. Because think about it. Now that it's happened, the Zelensky and the Ukrainian government did not prepare for this whatsoever, and so he's continuing on with his planned visits, and they really can't do anything now. They can't cancel one and go back because they know that the Russians are going to be targeting anything crossing the border right now to hope it's Zelensky. So I would put money on he is going to go back to Ukraine after his visit to the Netherlands, and they're probably going to be, well, his security team is probably going to be very concerned about how to get him back into the country and probably back into Kyiv without him getting attacked along the way, because the Russians are probably going to be pulling out all of their stops and trying to pull all of their little tricks out of the hat to try and get him before he gets back to Kyiv. They may even try and get him while he's in another country like the Netherlands, which I think he is currently en route to at this moment.
That'd be tough. I think he's actually already there in the Netherlands. He left Finland earlier.
And I don't really know if he is or isn't, because I know that he did wrap up the Finland visit today, but it's unclear if the map would work. I don't know what it is tonight because our internet connection is phenomenal, but the map is kind of working a little bit slow, and also your Discord call is breaking up just a smidge. But if he is already at the Finland, at Netherlands, or on the way, not really sure, but he should be here, or he is there right now. So with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and we are now moving into our super chat questions because we are all out of polls. And the very first one says Cindy Mitchell. And it doesn't say Cindy Mitchell. It is Cindy Mitchell, who puts in a $50 super chat. And thank you so much, Cindy, for the support. She says, today is the good Tucka's birthday. Could you give him a yeah? Tuck just turned 6, and LSA. And also, happy birthday to Tucka.
And also, happy birthday to Tucka. I hope he's having a great birthday today. He turned 6 years old. And also, he has to be, I think, one of the youngest members of the Lee Spring Army. He's an honorary Lee Spring Army member. And I've got to thank you, Cindy Mitchell, so much for letting us know that it is his birthday so that way we could wish him one. And also, thank you so much for the support as well and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this stream possible and everything about it. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one. Happy birthday to Tucka once again, and thank you so much, Cindy, for being an old guard here in the Lee Spring Army, and of course, helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from none other than Psyops, and thank you very much, Psyops, for the support, and it's good to see you once again. He says, it's kind of funny how you can just buy orange traffic cones, like how they do. Like how do they not need a license to buy those? And do they expect me not to become the ruler of the world or something? One click and I can ruin your day. Muhahaha.
And I thank you for the support, Psyops. I would have to say that is pretty interesting that they just allow anyone to buy orange traffic cones, because when you really do think about it, Matthew, with just a couple of traffic cones, you could shut down the off-ramps to an interstate. You know, like, I was just thinking about that. You really could, and no one would really contradict that, really.
Yeah, just put on a high-vis jacket and, you got credibility.
Yeah, I mean, like, that is pretty weird when you think about it. But still, nonetheless, I do thank you for the support. I don't know about what the one click to destroy your life means. I don't know what that means, but I do thank you for the support nonetheless. And always being here with us, Psyops, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible. And every time I ever thank Psyops for his support, I always think back to the moderators, Matthew, during the schism. And I'm always like, man, that was such a weird time that they just thought they could cuss out a viewer and it would be fine. I always think about that. I'm like, that is so weird. But still, Thank you so much.
It haunts you to this day.
It haunts me to this day. And the other thing that haunts me, Matthew, and it crossed my mind again, is that they sat there and said it's because Psyops is a supporter, but I just remembered that the moderators were also supporters as well. And then I sat there and said, well, I don't really care. We do the right thing here. And then they got pissed off and all that stuff. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for being an old guard in the Leaf Spring Army and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the final question of this segment. And then we'll be moving on into our location unknowns and the frontline news.
Real quick, Koljack said, the joke's on you. You assume I'm going to follow the law. I'd run those orange bastard cones right over.
I'm telling you,
they're
nice and orange. They're blocking the interstate really badly. As bad as
you gotta love the honesty.
I mean, like, honestly, I gotta admit, not bad at all. I like the honesty there, and I like the colorful illustration in the words. It was honestly pretty solid, I gotta say. But whoa, what do you mean you would run over the cones? What are you doing? But I'm just stacking it. Anyway, with that, we are on to the next one, the last one of this segment. Then we'll be moving on to the location unknowns.
All right, and the last one goes to Mark, Colonel of the LSA. And for some reason, Mark, I wrote down Mark Slava Ukraine in the spreadsheet. I guess my brain just reverted back to factory settings. But thank you very much. He puts in a $140 super chat. Extremely generous. And he says, Tucker has the same birthday as Matt. Hee hee hee. Tee hee.
Thank you so much for the support, Mark. Colonel of the LSA. We literally wrote the general staff last night. Your promotion to general has been approved, Mark. You can go back to being a general now if you would like. But still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. That is massive support and helps to keep the lights on and everything else behind the scenes to help this channel to keep on running. And I have to say, that is pretty cool to know that Tucker has the same birthday as Enforcer Matt. Now, for official reasons, I do have to say that it is not Enforcer Matt's birthday today. That comes later. My birthday actually already passed a good while ago. It was actually several months ago, but we never made any official comment about it on the channel, you know, for security reasons, because we don't really want people knowing my exact birthday, but I will be having an official birthday in the summer. We're still trying to figure out the date for that, but it's most likely going to be somewhere in June. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And very interesting to hear that it may be Matt's birthday. Is it, Matthew?
I mean, every day's my birthday now.
Every day is Matthew's birthday. Every single day. It honestly sounds like torture if every day is your birthday. Like, imagine having to go to a restaurant, then all the staff come out going, happy birthday, like, dude, I would never eat out if it was my birthday every day and that happened. I would literally stay inside like a hermit, like we already do, and just run the stream.
Man, the secondhand cringe from people having the birthday song sung at a restaurant just it kills me. It kills me.
It's terrible. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the location unknowns. And starting off with our first clip tonight, we saw that a Ukrainian hit a Russian soldier, not with his fists, but with something else. Artillery.
Loading screen.
Yeah, hit him with that loading screen. Oh, you see the Russian wandering around on the street. We can actually see two of them, as a matter of fact. And the artillery got him dead on. So, I mean, like, I'm telling you, he was absolutely blown to bits about that one. I don't even know how in the hell that pun's supposed to work. But anyways, with that, we're on to our next clip where we also saw some Spanish Ivecos, which are transport trucks in service with the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And one of our first sightings of the supply truck version of the Iveco. I believe we have seen the armored car version, but never these. Also, we're going to have to mute that, but we can see the Ivecos right there. A pretty odd-looking little truck, but it is great to know that the Spanish are providing just about everything they can to the Ukrainians, in all practicality, and that they are even getting supply trucks as well. Supply is a very important part of the military's operations. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of location unknown news, and on to our next one, where we saw a Ukrainian peon firing, and this time, we got a very interesting camera angle. This one was taken from the gunner's position. You know, that guy that kind of stands on the SPG and he's got his own little standing plate up there where he operates the gun. This is a camera angle from that position. So this is what it looks like for the gunner. We can see them loading the shell. You now see the mechanical arm ramming the shell home. We can now see them loading the powder charges and the mechanical arm shoving those in as well. Now we see the mechanical arm moving back, the breech swiveling shut.
Put some WD-40 on that thing.
Man, that thing sounded squeaky. And now we can see them firing it.
Jaga.
That is so cool from the gunner's position. That is neat. But it did take a while for them to load this thing and fire it. From the beginning of the clip to the end when they fired, it took 42 seconds for this gun to fire a single round. And this is about as fast as a peon can operate. And so, of course, as y'all can see, the shoot and scoot abilities of a peon, or at least the rate of fire of a peon, is quite low. In fact, I would say it's considerably low. With that, we're going to be moving on from this interesting clip and on into our next one, where we saw a Russian sniper shoot into a moving Ukrainian car, and somehow the bullet missed every single person in the car but passed completely through it. And so, without further ado, here's the clip. We can see them driving down the road, just minding their own business. This guy's actually trying to get on his phone, and the bullet just flies right through the middle, right literally through the middle of the car from almost in front of them, and misses everyone. Right there. And now you hear the Ukrainian soldier saying, go, 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 in Ukrainian, and that's the end of the clip. And also, listen to how calmly he said this. Like, they almost all got killed, and he just sits there and just says, go, go, go. Like, it's so calm. It's like, it's not even worried. It's like, oh, another sniper, man. There goes the windshield. But, you know, something interesting, Matthew, is I wonder if once they get off the front lines, are they going to call Flex Seal with their exclusive resin that will make sure to cover up the hole in their windshield, and you won't even be able to tell that it ever even happened. You know, honestly,
man, they better just go home and take a nap and sleep that one off, because they were lucky as hell for missing that.
Man, they were extremely lucky, unbelievably lucky. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to our last bit of location unknowns, where we can, of course, see the Russian losses today. And they are getting on up there.
Oh, boy.
Jesus, UCSB was the first one to throw in a Bobcat skid steer. Do you even lift?
Bro?
Jesus, UCSB, throw in a second Bobcat, and a woman driving it. The Simps, please show yourself. Let's see. Moving on from that, we can see someone saying, sure, sure, sure. Yeah, that's what they say with the Kremlin got blown up by the drone today. They went, sure, sure. What? And then we can also see Boston throwing in another Bobcat.
Hey,
this one was
he
toasted.
Said, oh, LSA, I get no respect. Fairly well, Slava Ukraine.
You threw in every punchline we say. And then we can see Edward throwing in the number 3 for the 3 Bobcats that were destroyed today. And the memes keep on going. In fact, there was a lot of Bobcat memes today, and including this really cool one from Brenda. That thing's actually like...
That's pretty cool.
That thing's actually like painted up. Like, that's actually pretty
Yeah, it's
cool.
like a race car livery Bobcat.
Yeah, it was. That was really neat. And moving on from that, not only was that really neat, but the losses altogether today were not that bad. We actually saw that 520 Russian soldiers, according to the Ukrainian casualty report, have bitten the dust today. Of course, it is an approximate number because an actual number on that would be pretty hard to ascertain. In fact, during every single war, enemy fatalities are almost always difficult to ascertain, so it could be above or below that number. But once again, at least according to the official report, the Ukrainians are getting close to taking out nearly 200,000 Russian soldiers. Not only that, they were able to take out 6 armored personnel carriers today. It is still below average, with around 10 to 12 armored personnel carriers being destroyed per day on average, but it is still not a small number whatsoever. We also saw that 14 supply trucks were destroyed today, getting on up there into the average, maybe even a little bit over average. 1 main battle tank was destroyed, that is well below average, with around 5 tanks being destroyed per day. A whopping 16 artillery pieces were destroyed over the past 24 hours. That is around 4 entire artillery batteries worth of artillery that was completely wiped off of the face of the earth across the entire battlefield. 28 drones were shot down over the past 24 hours. Most of those were shaheds. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems were also destroyed, around $30 million total in anti-aircraft warfare system losses. And finally, the 3 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, not that bad of a day for the Ukrainian armed forces. It isn't the highest losses that we've seen the Russians take in this war. Those losses would be found months ago during January, February, and also December. but it appears that once again the Russian losses are getting down towards a very high number relative to most wars, with the United States taking around this number dead per day on average in the entirety of the Second World War, and also the British taking about 100 less than that on average per day in the Second World War. So they're once again still in the high, I guess you could say, category, or the high numbers of losses compared to other wars, but at least relative to this war, it isn't as high as it used to be. And it is showing that the Russians are petering it out in their attacks in Bakhmut and also Avdiivka, as they're starting to run out of steam, and they are preparing for the Ukrainian counteroffensive that supposedly will most likely be happening at some point during this month. We're now going to be moving on from the location unknowns and on into the frontline news itself, where we've been hearing, of course, some pretty wild news. Starting off in Kuzmivka, where we saw some Ukrainian armor in action, a T-72B3 driving by a BTR-4 as it's firing into the distance. And here we go. And we hear them playing music, but we see the BTR-4 firing in the distance as the T-72B3 is driving by. Of course, the Ukrainians did not have T-72B3s at the beginning of the war. This is a Russian-captured tank that the Ukrainians are now using. And I like, Matty, how everyone on the tank, like, rubbernecked it to look at the BTR-4. Look at it. The commander's rubbernecking it. The gunner's rubbernecking it. Everyone's trying to get a look at that thing. They're like, wow, look at that. And that thing's doing work. I gotta say, I really like the BTR-4. I think that while it is a heavily upgraded Soviet vehicle, it is really cool looking nonetheless, and I also like the armor slats they put on the side of it to give it a little bit of extra protection. All in all, a really neat vehicle. Moving on from that clip and further on down the line, actually behind the lines, behind Makivka, we did see Ukrainian S-300 engaging Russian targets in the area today. 1 second. There actually was no audio for this clip, but we can see the S-300 fire, and the missile is on its way. We can see that multiple S-300 missiles were fired in this area. We didn't see a lot of them on film, but we are watching this one. It's flying its way on out into the distance, on into the horizon, and we have not seen it explode, so whatever it engaged was over the horizon. We can see that fire a second S-300 missile right there, which is now also on its way towards the target. Actually, this one went straight vertical nearly, up towards something that's right above them. And we couldn't really see if that one hit or not. But still, pretty wild to see. And also, another neat thing to see is that they actually have the S-300's radar right here. Of course, the S-300 launchers, the ones that actually fire the missiles, which I'll show you right here, that right there cannot pick up air targets entirely on its own. S-300s operate as a battery, and so they actually have to have these little radar systems that you see right here to be able to pick up the air targets, which the missile launching vehicles then engage. We don't really know if these missile interceptions were successful, one can only hope, but still pretty cool to see that the Ukrainians were using their S-300s to hopefully shoot down some air targets. With that, we're now going to be moving on further down the line, as the northeastern area was devoid of action today. In fact, the entire front line was devoid of any movement whatsoever. Deep State UA didn't even update the map today. There was such little movement. But moving on down into the area of Bielorivka and Zolotarivka, we did see a field-modified BTR. It appears that the Ukrainians, once again, are getting ingenuitive, as we saw that a BTR-60 has been modified to equip an M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun. These are pretty good machine guns, I have to say. Having fired one myself, they're not that bad, and they are, of course, heavy-hitting. This thing on its own can puncture through, with armor-piercing rounds, about 37 millimeters of armor, or about the thickness of a BMP's armor, meaning that it will be able to punch through and take out the crew inside. So just putting this 50 caliber onto this BTR and landing some accurate shots with it in the future means that this BTR could go up against the BMP and most likely take it out. So pretty cool to see, and pretty great to know that the Ukrainians are coming up with any way, shape, or form to try and modify any of the older vehicles that they're having to use due to, I guess you could say, a lack of equipment in some areas. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and further on down the line into Bakhmut. We got a load of news from Bakhmut today, an absolute large amount. Not as big as Rosie O'Donnell, but we did see in the area of Soledar today that the 3rd Brigade was once again hitting Russian positions on the northern flank and trying to make sure to keep the Russians at bay. Here's the clip. Also, we're going to have to mute that, but we can see them highlighting the Russian soldier down there in the trees. And this is not Vietnam, but they are in the trees. We can see them throwing in a meme from The Shining. And the bomblet is now on its way. We can see it spiraling down to the ground right there. The Russians in the tree works right here. We can see it explode, and the Russian soldier gets down. Look, he's running, right? Why? He doesn't have a job. Bleh. And now we can see another guy running in the other direction. And the drone's following this guy. It's got the heats for this guy here. He's now running
Someone
back.
told this guy, "You're going to clean your trench." He went running off.
That dude, they said, no, sleeping on the job. And he went, oh, please. And then you start running. He's like, what do you mean? Actually, no, I know what it was, Matthew. They sat there and said, your vodka ration is being reduced. And he went, suck it. And then he got up and he ran. He's like, I'm not dealing with this. Oh, but anyways, that's the end of the clip. And very nice to see the 3rd Brigade is once again keeping the Russian soldiers on edge, as that will, of course, continue to exhaust Russian soldiers, depleting their morale and helping the Ukrainians to fight against them. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the city of Bakhmut itself, where we have seen a large amount of video footage today of the battle going on there, either showing that the battle has increased in ferocity, or there was ability for more Ukrainian cameramen to be able to capture footage. Starting off with our first clip, we did see that a Russian sniper today was hit by artillery. Many people may not know this, but it is the running doctrine in most armies in the world that the way to deal with a sniper is to figure out where they're shooting from, about how far away they are, and then to call in artillery and blanket the entire grid that they're in with artillery. That is pretty much the running doctrine in most militaries around the world, including the US military, as to how to deal with snipers. And so pretty much in the end, snipers, if they're ever found and artillery is called in on them, they just become very, very, very expensive and well-trained cannon fodder, literally. But here's the clip. We're going to mute that because that may be copyright. But when you see the building that the sniper is in, we can actually see right there that they wrote out sniper. Just once again, a quick Skrillex class. This is the S. This H letter is actually the N. This is the A. This backward looking in with the little smiley face thing above it, that is the I. This weird shaped character here is the P. That is, of course, an E. And then the P is an R. Isn't the Cyrillic alphabet just the most confusing thing? Like, I don't know why it's like this. They could have just used the Latin alphabet for Slavic languages, but for some reason we have the Cyrillic alphabet. But in a sense, this just spells out sniper, and they're showing where the sniper is. He's apparently in this hole in the top floor of the building.
What was this building originally?
It looks to me like it was a part
Is
of
it a prison?
I don't know. It looks like it may have been, or it may have been a part of an industrial building. Wait a minute, hang on. No, this had to have been something like a prison, because they have like a little watchtower down there. I don't know.
Yeah, really. This looks like the most depressing. This can't be anything other than a prison.
And it turned into a prison for this guy, as he just got buried under the rubble when the artillery hit right on him. We now see the smoke coming out of the top of the building, as we did see that Russian soldier right there get hit.
It was absolutely incredible. Nobody lands artillery like the Donald. I'm telling you, it's absolutely impressive.
And we can see the artillery shell explode right there. And it looks like the poor man's prime real estate is no more. With that, that's the end of the clip.
Go back to your cell.
Back to your cell. Oh, Bliet, I came from one in Russia. Damn it, I'm going back. You know, I wonder if the Wagner guys refuse to fight in the spot right here. Because they're like, no, I came from a prison. I'm not going back, even in the war.
No, man, they feel right at home there. They feel comforted.
Also, wait a minute, hold up. We actually know where this is. There's the Bakhmut Railroad Station right there, and this appears to be looking south. So we might be able to find this on Google Maps. Hang on, let's go find it, because I gotta find this thing. Alright, so there's the railroad station. Now, I'm just saying, that would be kind of odd if they put a prison right by the railroad tracks. And let's see what it is. It is
a poker room.
It is a prison. It actually is a prison.
That's a menacing looking prison.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's
one hell of a prison right there. That's what the people are saying. That's a prison.
Well, what do you mean? That's just a detainment center. But anyways, pretty wild to see that they have a prison, like, right in the middle of the city, actually. Like, that's not a jail, that's a prison, and it's right near the railroad yard. Now, imagine this, Matthew. Imagine if a prisoner breaks free and a train is leaving the rail yard at the same time. He just hops on it, and he just goes wherever.
Yeah, I doubt they're getting out of there, to be honest.
I've got to be honest with you, I kind of doubt that they would get out of there, but that is pretty wild to see that the sniper picked the prison of all places to hide, and it appears to have not done him well at all. With that,
I wonder what Ukraine did to all the prisoners, when the battle broke out here. Did they, like, take them out or let them go?
I bet they probably just moved them on to another prison. And maybe they're having an overcrowding issue that we don't really know about. But that is interesting. Where in the world did those prisoners go? Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip where we saw the Ukrainians firing on Russian positions in the city today. We hear them playing the quiet, lo-fi hip-hop rap beat stuff in the background as the Ukrainian fires off his gun and then moves behind the other infantryman. The soldier there is sitting on the floor. He's holding his rifle, and it appears that this guy is loading an underslung rifle grenade to then poke back out and fire at the Russians here in a moment. You see that he's still loading the grenade, trying to nestle it on down into the tube of the launcher. You can now see the soldier once again moving back towards the position he was firing in earlier. So the Ukrainian soldier gives him some covering fire. He then fires the grenade and then turns around and moves back again. And that's the end of the clip, but once again showing some of the close-in firefights that are happening inside of the city. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on to our next one, where we also saw Bakhmut was bombed today. We don't really know who bombed it, but we did see that an aerial bomb landed somewhere near the outskirt of the city, and it appears to have been a very sizable one, maybe a Fab 500 or maybe even larger. Now we're going to have to mute that as well because we can hear that beep, 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 beep music playing, so we can't really play that. But we can see right there a mushroom cloud rising. Once again, we don't really know who dropped the bomb, but we did see that a large bomb was dropped on the city today. That's the end of the clip, but once again showing that Bakhmut is being bombarded with just about everything from both sides, including somehow aerial bombs, aerial dumb bombs for the most part. With that, we're moving on to our next clip where we saw a Ukrainian sniper counter-sniping in Bakhmut. Now, this is a rare way, well, actually, one second. Let me just read the caption real quick to make sure we get this correct, because I just realized there may be a discrepancy. Ukrainian marksman hunt for Russian machine gunner in multi-story building. So, not really counter-sniping, unless you want to call the machine gunner a sniper, which would be a pretty big stretch, but here's the clip.
К-700 приводу, К-700 приводу, на зв'язок.
Що там, є якісь де?
Нема вообще.
Привет, К-700 на зв'язку.
Можуть твої пацани ВАК зробити, короче, якийсь рух, щоб
You hear them
побачити.
discussing with each other?
На живця, як прийняв.
А ти як жалко, понял,
We can now see the marksman taking up his position and looking into the high rise. He's got a pretty nice rifle there.
Але дивись, кидай туди йди. Подивимося, що вони будуть робити. Як прийняв, Прийняв. Давайте тут не обережно, ви чуєте? І держись з приводу.
Готов, заряд делай.
Привід за тобою дивиться, це привід прикриває, поняв?
We can now hear some fire coming in, mostly from the machine gunner in that building, but it appears that he doesn't see the marksman, although the bullets are landing close.
Малий, по тобі? По тобі хуярять.
Вони по стороні школи, там в частному секторі.
We now see the marksman still looking into the building, trying to find the Russian. We now see him taking his first shots, firing in pretty rapid succession into where the spot the Russian machine gunner is in the building.
Есть.
You now see him continuing to fire.
Those are such nice, crispy shots.
They are, and
There's
I gotta say,
Druid
that's a
Certi
nice
Task,
looking
понял?
rifle for sure.
Бьешь туда, выше тики надо, выше.
We now see him reloading and telling something to
Бери
his
выше,
team
да.
members.
Він в глубине комнаты сидить, да, блядь. Попробуй попасть по синему балкону. Есть заряд.
We hear, well, you actually see artillery coming in on the building they were firing at with the Russian machine
Красавчик,
gunner
чуть-чуть
inside of it.
левее, блядь.
You now see the marksman getting up for a moment. You hear some rifle fire in the distance as the marksman once again sets up and continues to fire.
Синий балкон вали.
We once again see the marksman continuing to fire.
Выше бери, выше, вниз идет.
That was interesting. I don't even know what that came from. I guess the echo of the machine gun on the buildings.
Андрюха, лента как.
You now see the soldiers kidding around a little bit later on. And the rest of the video is them conversating after the firefight with the Russian machine gunner in the building, and it appears that as far as things are concerned, this is the end of the clip. Once again, though, I'd like to give a huge credit to the Presidential Brigade, that is the one that has the marksmen in this video, for conducting sniping operations pretty much along the entirety of the Donetsk front line, all the way from Bakhmut, all the way down to the area of Marinka, from what we've been able to tell. Quite a large front line they cover, and it appears that they are being moved around as, I guess you could say, crack shots or snipers, for that matter. So with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and into our next one from the front line, where we once again saw more footage from Bakhmut. This one has no audio, but we can see the cameraman looking at the wall of the trench and something exploding right outside, throwing up dust and debris and throwing it inside of their trench. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But once again, very interesting to see that the Ukrainians are just having to tough it out. And they tough it out quite well, actually. With that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip from the front line, where we saw the 30th Brigade also taking out Russians near the highway perimeter. Oh, whoa. I don't know what the hell that is.
That's a bop.
Dude, that thing sounded like a dying seagull with a tambourine
It
being
did.
played nearby. We can see the
Somebody heard the seagull and said, "Sample that. Put me on loop."
Dude, someone said, dude, that seagull in its death, it be creating life. We getting out the hood with this one. And then they said, you're going deeper in the hood with this one. But we can see the Russian soldiers just kind of making their way along with the sacks under AGS fire. We can now see the Russian checking out another fella and looting him, actually. And we can see more artillery fire coming down, interrupting the Russians' brief looting. And now you can see them carrying on a Russian soldier. And that's the end of the clip. But that's pretty interesting to see. It appears that they dragged the guy along after they looted him. Once again, don't leave possible loot behind. That's a normal kind of Russian strategy. With that, we're moving on into the area of Ivnivsky, where we saw that the Ukrainians have a pretty cute dog. The caption is, Ukrainian warriors are busy, but who cares? And look at it.
Is this like a Corgi German Shepherd something mix?
I don't know. It's got pretty long... It's a mix of something. That's a cute dog. I like it. And you can see the Ukrainian soldiers playing with this little piece of thing where you see a soldier in the background, the dog once again grabbing it, and then taking it outside with him. And that's the end of the clip, but I gotta say, I like the cute dog. It was, in fact, a cute dog. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, well behind the lines at Chasiv Yar, where we saw that the Ukrainians are preparing Chasiv Yar to become the next Bakhmut fortress. Also, I'm going to have to mute that. But we can see the Ukrainians setting up some defenses, most likely. And Chasiv Yar will most likely become the next Ukrainian defensive position. It is the next city down the T-0504. It's in a fairly defensible location, being on the highest ground anywhere in the Donetsk Oblast, and so it is the most defensible position out of all of them. And so hopefully the Ukrainians will be able to mount an effective defensive here once they are pushed out of the city of Bakhmut, which at this point will largely be inevitable. We're now going to be moving on down into the area of Toretsk, where we also saw a peon firing in the east. And I just think it's crazy, man, that they call these things peons, but they are like the largest artillery piece on the front line. Also, I'm going to have to mute that because these guys eat raw meat. Call them Liver King. We can see them firing the peon right there. And then the clip ends. But once again, very nice to see the Ukrainian artillery in action. We're now moving on even further down the line, past the, I guess you could say, Pisky and Avdiivka front lines and back towards Karlivka, where we saw that the Ukrainians had captured a BMP-3 today that had a decent amount of armor modifications tacked onto it. So, here's the clip. Well, guys, soon she will go to Avdiivka, my bird, the third one. Now she is standing in the car, and we have collected her completely. There's one little child left. Tomorrow we are leaving with her. And we will have everything in a couple of years. My little one. We can see this guy loves this BMP-3. Someone needs to keep an eye on this guy because the way he's talking to the BMP-3, I have a feeling odd things are happening. I'm just kidding. But still, really neat to see that this guy has himself a captured BMP-3, and it appears the Ukrainians are getting this thing ready for service near the Avdiivka front line, and hopefully to good results. We're now going to be moving on from the Donetsk area on the Ukrainian side, and well behind the lines towards Mospinye, where we saw a Russian ammo dump explode today. The Ukrainians were able to land a lucky strike right into the middle of it and create a sizable explosion. You see it exploding in the distance as the ammunition and everything else within the ammo store is going up. All of our ammo keeps blowing up! And that's the end of the clip, but I gotta say, love to see it. Love to see it. And the Russians, once again, are being deprived of more vital ammunition for their vital war effort. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into the next one, further down the line, and in the area of Novomykhailivka and also Volodar, where we saw that the Ukrainians have created a makeshift dual RPG launcher.
Так, ну что, братан, получили игрушечку. Снимай. Помогите ему снять.
We can see the guy carrying it on his back like a backpack. We can now see him getting it off, the other soldier helping him to set it down. And we can see that they've made a mounted stand for 2 RPGs. This is next level. Guts, glory, RPG. When you see him hooking it up to a battery.
He's gonna stand right behind the back blast area in case it goes off.
Well, there's no RPGs that are inside of the actual RPGs.
You know what? That's a good point. I was about to call this redneck too, but you can't even really call this redneck. It's actually pretty well engineered for what it is.
It is. I'd have to say, this is pretty impressive. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But you always got to give it to the Ukrainians and their ingenuity. They're always coming up with pretty cool, creative stuff. And I see everyone in the live chat saying, cool, nice, nice. And I'd have to say as well, cool, nice, and nice. With that, we're moving on from that little clip in the area near Novomykhailivka and Volodar, and on down towards the area of Staromanivka, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able to conduct a fairly accurate drone strike today. And when I say accurate, I mean that thing accurate. Let's watch. And we're going to have to mute that, but we can see the bomblet explode. One Russian soldier decides that, you know, he has to do some aerobics. We can now see 3 Russian soldiers moving down the trench. And we can see the bomblet falling and landing right where it needs to. So that way 2 Russian soldiers take naps. We can now see the bomblet being lined up on another part of the trench with several more Russians inside of it. This one landing right dead center and throwing one of the AKs down the trench. It appears that it has in fact disarmed these men. We now see them looking up into the sky and wondering why in the world they're even in this war, and for that I can't really answer. We can now see the Ukrainians dropping another bomblet. Once again, fairly effective, fairly accurate. We now see this bomblet hitting as well. Fairly accurate. Once again, naps insured. Money back guaranteed. We now see multiple Russians with one bomblet already landing on the berm of the trench to the left side of the video. We now see them lining up the next one as well. This one's on its way down, and fairly accurate. Results guaranteed. We now see another one. Once again, fairly accurate. The results are, of course, guaranteed. And that's the end of the clip. But I have to say, it is pretty impressive to see that the Ukrainian drone pilots in this part of the front line, part of the Code 9.2 unit, are able to get that accurate with their drone strikes where the bomblets fall within feet or right within the formation of Russian soldiers. With that, we're now going to be moving on down to the Kerch and onto the eastern side near the town of Taman, where we got additional video footage from last night's drone attack on the oil refinery. Right here, we actually saw the video footage of the drone coming in and slamming into the oil silo. This attack the Ukrainian government did claim was theirs. We can see them pointing out with a ruler where the drone is. We can see it exploding right up there.
Ah, bada boom.
Bada boom, jaga jaga. And actually we can see that the drone was hit with something right there, but it kept on going. And now we can see it hit its target right over there and ignite the oil that was inside of that silo. Well, that's the end of that clip, but we're moving on to our next one, where we once again saw the fire from that oil tank continuing on later in that morning. Well, this morning, actually. It's nice and warm, bled, like a good cooking fire that the babushka used to make, bled. Man, that
It
thing
looks
is
hot,
warm.
bled.
You know, one thing I have to say, Matthew, is that breathing in air in Russia must be like breathing in a fat stogie. You know, you just get lung cancer immediately. With that, we're now moving on from that clip, well, those 2 clips from the Taman oil refinery. And with that, we've covered all of the news, north to south, east to west, across the entirety of Ukraine. And so, without further ado, it is time for the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on the 434th day of the war. And let me make sure this is his speech from today. And it is loading.
Are we going to get it?
And
Hey!
this one was made on the 2nd of May. Let me make sure. This is actually his yesterday's speech. There was no speech today as he was in transit from Finland to the Netherlands. Oh, dear. So with that, that is the end of our news segment for the day on day 434. I thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because that does help us to keep this channel rolling. And also, make sure to share it with your friends because if you did enjoy, other folks might enjoy as well. So don't let them miss out on the fun. Help them to join the Lee Spring Army by sharing the Enforcer channel with them. And so with that, we're now about to be moving on into our question segment. We're going to address all of the super chats that have come in tonight, and as well as many live chats as possible. But before we get to any of those, we're going to have to address the polls, much to the dismay of one person in the live chat who has made it very clear to us they don't like polls. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Anyways, we have several polls to address, and the very first one says, the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has issued a security alert about missile attacks on Kyiv soon. And what are your thoughts? 55% said not good, it must be serious. 6% said unsure. 36% said, it's just precautionary. And 3% said the U.S. is fear-mongering. And I think this is probably serious. The U.S. isn't going to announce to the American citizens here domestically that they know something's about to happen in Ukraine, but we can get a clue as to whether or not the U.S. has intelligence that we're not aware of by looking and seeing what the embassy is telling people in Ukraine. And from the looks of it, the U.S. must have gotten some pretty solid intel indicating that Russia is going to launch a very serious attack on Kyiv. And allegedly, we've heard rumors that they might try to attack the administrative buildings this time in much bigger force. But that is, of course, unconfirmed. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it certainly shows that the U.S. is believing that there will be a large attack of some form coming in the future, most likely a conventional missile attack, which is fairly interesting here. I think that it's something that's expected at this point. Obviously, the Russians will respond to that drone attack, whether it was committed by the Ukrainians or not, in some way, shape, or form. And so it wouldn't be out of the question to expect that a missile attack will be targeted directly at Kyiv here in the future. So with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, the IAEA says that Russia has rigged explosives on reactor number 4 of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And what are your thoughts? It's an evenly split poll, very shockingly. 45% said that is insane and unbelievable. 45% also said I expected as much from Russia. 6% said, it's probably been like that. And 4% said unsure. And for me, I am kind of in shock that they've done this. We did find out the other day that they've established firing positions on top of the reactor buildings themselves. That was kind of expected, in my opinion, to do something to that extent. But to actually put explosives on or near the reactor, that is a whole nother level of insanity. Absolutely crazy. At this point, they're using the facility as insurance. So if anything goes really wrong, they have the explosives there and they'll probably try to blow it up. It's insane to think in this modern day and age that somebody would do something that insane, but Russia is apparently willing to do it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's certainly not unexpected from the Russians. You know, the Russians are the Russians after all, so they would do something stupid like that. But it is pretty wild to think that that in the modern world someone would just go and say, yeah, I would blow up a nuclear reactor. But it's like, do they really understand the implications of blowing up an active nuclear reactor and what that's going to do to them and the rest of the world? It's like these people don't really think. But let's go find reactor number 4. I honestly feel like we're at Chernobyl right now, Matthew. Raise the power. But let's see. Let's go find reactor number 4 once.
Could you record this in the log?
Raise the power. Yes, sir. But dang, man. What is up with the map tonight? Dude, I'm
telling you, it's the internet because I'm having some lag over here too.
Yeah, I'm having lag. It shows our internet connection is good. I will say this though, it is hot as hell in this room. And now YouTube is saying that they're having a bitrate problem. But our OBS is showing that it's perfectly fine. So I don't know what's up with that. So I believe this is reactor number 4 right here, if I'm correct. I can't see the numbering on it. Wait a minute, nope, there it is, number 4 right there. And that's number 3, yep. And that's number 2, yep. So this is number 4. This is the one they have explosives added on to. And I would have to say that is nuts to think that they have defense positions on top of it. And now, on top of that, they are also sitting here and preparing to blow one of the reactors up. It'll be a massive situation if they do. And I think that is going to be pretty serious, to say the least. One second, let me check my email here. And nope, nothing's happened to us. So, it is what it is. But that's still pretty wild to see that YouTube is apparently having problems on their end, because we're not having problems on our end right now. Our internet is working completely fine, and it appears that our OBS is chugging along at perfectly fine bit rates. So it must be YouTube's problem. So with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, reports say that Ukraine has begun withholding intel regarding its counteroffensive from allies, and what are your thoughts? It looks like 47% said understandable, the U.S. is untrustworthy, 26% said I'm mixed on this one, 17% said unsure, and 10% said no intel sharing equals no more aid. And I'll be completely honest, on this one I am kind of mixed. I do understand that Ukraine is a little paranoid now that we've had that Discord leak with the young man from the National Guard,
Thug Shaker
allegedly.
Central, rep the set.
Yeah, I do understand where they're coming from on that. However, they don't find us untrustworthy enough to keep accepting our equipment. So it's a little bit of a double standard there. I think that it should be more forthcoming with the intel and share it with the U.S. Because if you're going to accept our equipment, you would play both sides. You either got to be all in or all out, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with that all the way. You're either all in or all out. You can't take our aid and then sit there and say we're untrustworthy, because if we're that untrustworthy, then where's the next aid package going to come from? That's how I would react to that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to call your biggest international supporter in the war untrustworthy. Because if they were untrustworthy, guess who wouldn't have American weaponry? The Ukrainians wouldn't have American weaponry. And so, with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, but I don't really know why the Ukrainians would even insinuate that we are untrustworthy. Because, and I'm not trying to throw smoke or anything, but wasn't it them who had to conduct the border guard sting just like a week ago, where they found out that every major border checkpoint into Poland was accepting bribes for conscription-age men to cross? I mean, that kind of seems a little questionable to me. And honestly, at that point, it's tit for tat. There's problems here and there on every end. You can't act like it's going to be perfect, but that doesn't make us untrustworthy because Thug Shaker Central happened. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one says Iran has seized a second oil tanker within a week, and the U.S. demands its release or else. And what are your thoughts? 72% said not good, and action is needed by the USA. 8% said unsure. 7% said I'm mixed on it, and 12% said it's not our ship and let it go. And I'm going to have to take the cop-out answer on this one as well. I'm kind of mixed. It is not our ship. It's Panama flagged. It was coming from Dubai, and it was going to the UAE, and it was carrying oil. So apparently the U.S. is kind of playing the police here in this situation, and nothing wrong with that, but it isn't our ship. The first one they got, that one was heading to, I believe, Texas, so that was actually interfering with our trade. So I understand what we did on that one, but this one, I'm on the fence. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, although it is a Panamanian flag ship, we do have a responsibility to try and return that one as well, considering that we want to be the policing force in the Western world. There's really no one else who can do it anyways, even if we didn't want to be. I would say we should get that thing back. The best way you could sit there and do that is to wave the Monroe Doctrine through the air like everyone does every single time we want to do anything over here in the Americas, and say that because it's a country in the Americas, it's our responsibility to return it, and they can't mess with the thing. So with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well, and I think we should also try and get the American ship back that, from what I understand, is still in Iranian hands. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says Ukraine shot down 21 of the 26 shahed drones fired at its capital yesterday. And what are your thoughts? 69%. Have no idea how it happens. Nice. Said Western air defense is paying off. 5% said unsure. 19% said, it's good, but not great. And 6% said not good, it needs improvement. And I think 100% Western air defense is paying off. The Patriots are out there. We got all kinds of other equipment out there that we've given them to help make sure that they can shoot these things down before it actually hits a target in a populated area. I would say 21 out of 26, that is good. Obviously, there's room for improvement, but considering the circumstances, that is excellent. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say the Western air defense is certainly paying off. Western air defense is the best in the world. It is. It is honestly incredible. I mean, really, everything the West makes is the best in the world. Think about it, Matthew. Think about it. Who in the world makes the best stealth aircraft?
Us.
Who in the world makes the best ships?
Us.
Who in the world makes the best planes?
Us.
That's right. So why in the hell would we make the best air defense?
China, they're making great planes. They're making incredible ones. They look like a toy from Mattel. I'm telling you, it's scary stuff. This thing looks absolutely stupid. It takes the design philosophy of an F-22 and mixes it with Mattel, toy company, Hasbro, and they come up with the absolute worst garbage. Worst garbage I've ever seen. Nobody can top it. Nobody at all. This thing is
They
ugly.
took they took the front winglets off the Eurofighter, I believe. Isn't that the other plane that has them?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, they did them wrong. It would have looked okay in my opinion, but the way they've put them on the plane, it looks like they really don't belong.
Oh man, and this thing is huge. Like, we did the size comparison of all the stealth aircraft the other day. And actually, here's the size comparison side by side of the F-22 versus the J-20. And interestingly enough, this is the second worst supposedly stealth aircraft in the world in terms of its cross-section on a radar next to the Su-57. It's about, funnily enough though, the Su-57 is so bad that while the J-20's cross-section signature, from what we know, is twice as bad or 3 times as bad at our worst estimates than the F-22 or the F-35, the Su-57 is twice as bad off as the J-20. And it actually shows up on radar like a Gripen C would from Sweden, which isn't stealth at all, and it's a 4th generation fighter. This thing sucks. It really does. And, this is a rabbit hole, really, but I think it's important to note that whenever you see things like this, and it looks impressive, and the Chinese do have, I think, about 100 and something of these, maybe 200 something of them. I'd actually have to pull it up. Let's go to the Chinese Air Force. It's called the People's Liberation Army Air Force because everything's called the People's Liberation Army something. But let me go and let this thing load. Come on, YouTube. All right. Well, not YouTube, sorry, Google. I'm blaming the wrong people, sorry, force of habit. But let's go down here, and here's their list of stuff. So, they actually have, how many of these? They have 140 of them, at least according to their public figure. So that's actually
140 of those ugly things.
Yeah, 140 of these ugly mugs. They have 16 J-16s, which are just really an Su-30, but it's Chinese made. They also have Shenyang J-11s, which are also an Su-27. They also have J-10s, which are like their rip-off version of a Eurofighter Typhoon, although from what we understand, it doesn't perform as well, and it doesn't also have all the modern avionics of a Eurofighter Typhoon. It is a little bit behind the times. They also have the Shenyang J-8, which is hideous. It is an enlarged MiG-21, so it is just a long-body MiG-21. There's a lot of these that are still in service. They are terrible, and they're also dated. They came into service.
Let's put the jet turbine right in the nose.
Yeah, let's just let the thing suck in the air right in the front. I'm dying. But these things suck. They have, let's see, I don't know, around 78 of them that are still in service. 48 of them are now reconnaissance aircraft. They also have 24 Su-35s, about 73 Su-30s, 32 Su-27s. And this is probably the craziest one. The largest part of their Air Force is J-7s. And this is why I never take the Chinese seriously whenever anyone wants to make them out to be a threat. Because this is the bulk of their Air Force by numbers for the large part. Something like 20% of their whole Air Force is MiG-21s that are made by the Chinese. These are license-built variants of the MiG-21, and the Russians put these out of service. The Soviet Union put these out of service in the late 1970s. The Chinese still use hundreds of them to this day. That's why I don't take the Chinese seriously, because they, much like Russia, have a thin veil of advanced modernity to their military that makes it look like, on paper, at least on propaganda terms, it is on par with the United States. But once you start to rip away that veil, you get crap like this, and it makes up a large part of their Air Force. It is literal junk. And then not only that, there's a couple of smaller outliers, only 120 JH-7s. This thing is a fighter bomber. It's probably the dumbest looking fighter bomber I've ever seen. If I had to compare it to anything, I would say this would fill the role of like a A-7 attacker from the U.S. Air Force, which aren't even in service anymore.
This is called the PLAF. What they call the PLAF.
The People's Liberation Army Air Force, I think, or something like that.
Oh.
And then they have this thing. This is their bomber. It's an X6. Oh, an H6. Sorry. But this thing is terrible.
That's actually okay. It's okay looking.
No, man, no. Because if I show you what it's based off of, which is the Tu-16, this is what it's based off of.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. This thing went into service in 1952. And I know the B-52 is old. Yes, I know that. But this is just terrible. This thing's ugly. And also the Chinese version of it, which is literally just a carbon copy of it, is also ugly. these things are terrible. And they're dated beyond belief. And then the rest of their Air Force is just, odds and ends stuff. Also, another thing I'd like to point out is that, let me go down to their transports. They have a decent amount of transports, but they are, of course, Antonov 2s. And they don't really have any big ones like IL-76s. They only have 20 IL-76s that they could use. And that means that the ability for them to drop paratroopers onto an island like Taiwan would be very low. In fact, supplying them would be very low as well by the air. But still, anyways, moving on from that, what were we talking about, Matthew? Because something got me onto to this. So what was it?
It was the poll, and I can't remember what the poll was.
Well, I hope we answered it fairly well. I don't even know what it was anymore, but I hope we answered that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and we are moving on to our super chat questions, and then we'll move on to our live chat questions shortly afterward. But our first super chat goes to Robert Nicholson, who puts in a $20 super chat, and thank you very much, Robert, for the support. He says, get something fun for your dog.
Hey,
snake repellent.
Yeah, snake repellent. And thank you for the support, and thank you for helping us to get something fun for our dog. Honestly, I think the funnest thing for our dogs would be more flower bones. They love flower bones. They love them to death. And so we'll get them more flower bones. Probably, maybe, most likely. And also, another thing I'd like to point out is that my Porter Miso will work, little baby boy, and I'll pull up some pictures of little baby Miso will work on our...
Also, real quick, Enforcer, stall on this one because I'll be right back.
Okay. Our little baby Miso will work that you see in the picture right here. He was sick today. He was having a little bit of a problem. I'm not going to get into what his problem was, but we had to take him to the vet, and he had to get a shot, and he cried when he got the shot, and I felt really bad. And we also had to get medicine as well, because he's got a little bit of a bacterial thing going on. But hopefully he will get better. And he was a sweet little thing the whole time he was at the vet. But I love my dogs. This is Mr. Corgi, and if I scroll up a little bit further, here's a little baby Shiba that was bitten by a snake recently. Both of them are having a rough time with it right now, but she's gotten way better. And Mr. Corgi, he's still in good spirits, and he's pretty well off, rather than like the whole condition that he has. So hopefully that'll get fixed. But I do thank you so much for the support, because it will help me to make sure that little Monsu will work right there in that picture, will continue to be A-OK. And so, with that, hopefully Matthew has returned.
Hello.
Oh, hello there. And so, what were you going for, my boy?
Just had to go out there and check on the little Wargi.
Was he crying?
Oh, no, I just went out there to make sure he's all right.
Oh, all right. Well, with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and also getting us something cool for our dog. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, Matthew, run a poll. I'd like to see this. Which Corgi is cuter, Shiba or Mr. Corgi? I think they're both equally cute, in my opinion. But what do y'all think? Who do y'all like better, Shiba or Mr. Corgi? I would be interested to know. But with that, we will be moving on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mark, Colonel of the LSA, once again, who puts in a $27 donation. And thank you very much, Mark, for the support. He says, how is your dog doing now? And completely recovered from the snake, ?
And I thank you so much for the support, Mark. And she is doing great. She has largely recovered almost entirely from the snake bite. She still has the holes in her fur and also the 2 little fang marks on her head. But beyond that, she is doing good. And hopefully will be on the up and up. We hope that she doesn't get bitten by a snake again. Because honestly, that is... I hated that she got bit by a snake. We honestly wanted to go out into the yard and kill every snake we could find. We haven't gotten around to doing that yet, so we just keep a very sharp eye on them and follow them literally right behind them when they're outside now to make sure that they don't get bit again. Because it hurt me as bad as it probably hurt the dog that it got bit, because we love our dogs. We love them to death. They're extremely precious, extremely sweet. And the fact that they got bit, well, the fact that Shiba got bit at all, enraged everyone in the house. Honestly made us ready to go out there and just start carpet bombing the yard with like snake repellent, mothballs, anything you could imagine, and then also shovels to bash them in with. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you help us to keep this thing running behind the scenes. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Carson Larimore, and thank you very much, Carson, for the support, who says, seems like a false flag to generate more support. Putin desperate. He needs motivation for volunteers like when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
And I would say that may be the case, actually. That's why I'm not really ruling out that it could have been a Russian false flag attack. And usually I'm one that is really against the idea of false flags. Usually I'm one into saying what you see is what you get. Because most people, well, a lot of people at the beginning of the war were wanting to say that both sides were committing false flags everywhere, to the point they weren't even fighting a war against each other. They were just blowing themselves up and then blaming the other one for it. But this one was weird enough that it blew up on the flagpole. That is really weird. That's incredibly odd. Out of everything they could have attacked, they actually could have hit the building and caused a little bit of damage to it. Instead, they hit the flagpole. Like, what's that going to do? So I would honestly have to agree with you. It may have been a false flag by the Russian government to try and rally the Russian population into volunteering and also enrage them, so that way when a full mobilization comes around, they don't really protest against it much and they're actually for it. So with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Alan Sanderson, who puts in a $12 super chat. And thank you very much, Alan, for the support. He says, if this was a staged attack, do you think Russia is just looking for an excuse to cancel VD celebrations, Victory Day? I'm sure Putin is terrified of an attack during that day.
And that is a good question. It may be so. It may be that they're planning on canceling the May 9th parade, but the May 9th parade has a lot of significance historically to the Russian public. It is especially, I guess you could say, everything surrounding it. They're not going to be having that normal little memorial walk that they have after the parade this year, however. They did cancel that. But they may be trying to get out of that as well. One thing that we have seen, however, and I have not shown here because it's a very long video, is that they have had a rehearsal already of the Russian ground forces that will be involved in the Victory Day parade here soon. So they are training. They are training the soldiers how to march down the square and everything like usual. So it does show that they have the forces to do it. One thing I did notice though is that a lot of those guys were incredibly young. Like they looked like they were 18 and less in age. So they're fairly young. Maybe showing that they're running out of manpower and they're having to pull largely on the cadet forces that are still inside of Russia to try and pull enough manpower for the Victory Day parade. But I would say it may go underway considering they've already done the training, but they may not either, and they may use this for justification. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. But then again, I have to say this before we address it fairly well and move on. What kind of picture does that paint to the Russian public that the Ukrainians can actually stop them from having their blessed parade on the 9th of May? That's not a good look for the Russians either, because it shows that they are actually very vulnerable to Ukrainian attacks, and they can't really do the normal stuff they did. They pulled one off last year on May 9th in the middle of the war. So it would be very weird if they didn't pull one off again. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, let's go over this poll. Which corgi is cuter? Is it Mr. Corgi or Shiba? The poll is evenly split. 13% said Mr. Corgi, 13% said Shiba, and 74% said both of them. And I'm with both of them. I can't choose. I love them both equally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say both. And I think that was really cute, actually, that Mr. Corgi and Shiba ended up being tied as well. Like, it is literally both across the board for the large part. But still, that is great. I love it. I love it. I love the dogs. And one day we will make a video about them. I think it's going to be great. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a super chat from CK Bold, who puts in a $10 super chat. It says, take a live chat question and have a good night.
And we will take a live chat question. And I hope you have a good night as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And what do we got for the live chat?
And the live chat goes to JC the Music Man, who says, do you think the new Going Green War is when each side just attacks itself to save fuel?
The Going Green War. I don't really know what that means, to be honest with you. But I do thank you for the support, and I don't think anyone would ever just attack themselves. One thing that people don't really understand much in the modern world is that governments and countries derive their power from the size of their population. And of course, that is beneficial in some ways, not in others. There's a few exceptions to that rule, like China, that had a one-child policy because overpopulation was becoming a serious concern for them. But most countries encourage their citizens to have as many kids as possible, or they try and protect their manpower pool as best as possible, or they bring in immigrants to try and boost the number of manpower that they have in their country. Because that is raw economic power. A working hand produces money, and that money eventually is siphoned off by the government in taxes and other things. And then that, of course, translates to direct power. And so you would probably never see, and that's why I'm not a big fan of believing that false flags happen all over the place, is because it wouldn't make a lot of sense for a country to go, well, yeah, we ought to obliterate an entire company of men in our military that took time for us to train. It cost us money to train them. And then they're also working hands in our economy that make us money. And we ought to just do that regularly to make the other side look bad. In the end, they're hurting themselves, and they're not really doing anything rather than giving people complaining points about going, gee, look how bad the Russians are. And it doesn't really achieve anything much more than that. And that's why I'm not really a big fan in believing in a large amount of false flags, because it doesn't really benefit the country that's doing it much if they kill off a lot of their people and such things like that. But with that, I do hope that answers the question fairly well. I don't really know where to go with that question, because I don't know what a green war is. Like a novice war? I don't really know. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Stray Cat 241, who puts in a $10 super chat, $10 super chat, and thank you very much for the support. I've seen in most media they were feeling too much sympathy over this Kremlin thing. We all seen in the first days of the war how they sent Chechen hit squads, and now they're clutching their pearls.
And I would have to say yes. I'd have to agree with you. The Russians have been committing a brutal war in Ukraine so far. They've been committing atrocities against everyone. And what's funny is that Putin is acting like, well, the Russian government as a whole is acting like it's unheard of that they would attack the Kremlin. But as I remember correctly, Matthew, we actually watched videos way back in the first week of the war of Russian hit squads that just drove into Kyiv and were just wildly driving around trying to find Zelensky and kill him.
And they all got wiped out.
Yeah, and they all got wiped out. So it's like like if Putin thinks it's bad, wait until he's in a motorcade, literally racing around the city with hitmen driving everywhere trying to find him and kill him. That's pretty much what happened at the beginning of the war for Zelensky. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense, the Russian reaction, and that people are showing any sympathy at all to the attack on the Kremlin, considering that in this war, the Russians have done even far worse, directly aimed at the Ukrainian government. And nobody really even batted an eye. Everyone's just went, oh, that's unfortunate. But they didn't act like some people are about the Kremlin attack. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Psyops. Once again, he puts in a $10 super chat. And thank you very much, Psyops, for the support. He says, live chat question, because I ran out of funny months ago.
And thank you for the support, Psyops. You haven't run out of funny yet. They're always something we can't read. but still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to get on to the live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to, let's see here. It's going to go to KG, who says, what do you think the composition of the assault brigades will be in terms of numbers and types of vehicles?
I would say that's probably an OPSEC thing to get into specifically. But if I had to give you a guess, we'll probably see that it's organized a lot like a battalion tactical group, where 800 men or so will have about 10 tanks and 30 APCs supporting them apiece. Although Ukrainian units are usually lighter than that, it may be around 7 MBTs and maybe 20 to 25 APCs supporting about 800 guys in a BTG type structure. But we're not exactly sure, but that would be my ballpark guesses as to what those units would look like. But take it with a grain of salt, because the Ukrainian unit composition is kind of similar to Russian unit composition in the BTG style, but not quite. So with that, I hope that does answer that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Randy Tosto, who puts in a $10 super chat. And thank you, Randy, very much for the support. He says, your parents deserve credit for bringing up really good young men, and tell the LC how they did it. And thank you, Randy, I mean, that is very high praise, and we do appreciate it.
And thank you, Randy. Thank you so much for the support. And of course, helping this channel to keep on rolling. It means a lot to us. Now, I'll tell you all the story of how we grew up like this. Our parents decided that homeschool much? I'm just kidding. But our parents decided that it was actually smart for us to go to public school. And so, you know, we didn't really know any better back then. We were like, okay. One thing that we were lucky, though, is that we didn't go to Montgomery public schools because I feel like we would have just gotten stabbed by a shiv and died in kindergarten. But
We would
went,
have.
yeah, we
Without a
went,
doubt.
yeah, we went to public school in a town near Montgomery, and we got kind of involved with normal folks, you know, like, you know, folks who would find normally instead of going to a private school. And, you know, I don't mean to really say a lot against private school or homeschool or anything, but you don't really socialize normally in private school or homeschool. Like, you know, and I know if any of y'all were homeschooled or private schooled, you know, that is what it is. But in my experience, running into people who did end up in public school that had been homeschooled most of their lives or private schooled most of their lives, they always were a little different, you know, like they really didn't know how to click or interact with people. And I feel like that's a very important thing to know going into the world or society, is how to interact with other people in society. So, you know, we went to public school our entire lives, you know, we're pretty normal, and our parents, I guess you could say, were a little bit more strict than normal parents in the modern world would be. You know, we still receive spankings and stuff like that. That was normal for us. And I think that was actually, honestly, I'd have to say, I think that was a very important part of growing up was, I guess you could say, the side of punishment if you did do something wrong that was bad enough. Because it was I know for Matthew and me, it was certainly a reinforcer of what we should not do versus what we should do. So with that, I would have to say that's really how we grew up to be the way we were. I have to say, we have unbelievably great parents. I don't know if my mom's outside of my door or not because she's usually just right outside of my office, but we had exceptionally good parents. They raised us incredibly well. They had boundaries, they had rules, they had limits. And they largely molded us into who we are today. Of course, not everything, though. Neither of my parents are into history at all whatsoever. That's just kind of an interest of my own. And there was a whole bunch of other crazy things that I just did on my own. Like, I learned bagpipes, which is something that was just a thing I did. A whole bunch of crazy stuff like that. But that's kind of, I guess, a summary. So with that, thank you so much for the support and the high praise as well. I'm sure my parents would be very proud to hear that. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you help me to be able, and also Matthew, to be able to do this as a full-time job 6 days a week with no ads and no sponsors in the way. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Cliff H. And thank you very much, Cliff, for the support. He says, Enforcer Matt, a.k.a. the polygamist extraordinaire. And I have to say, that's quite different. That's exotic.
What does that mean?
I don't know how to describe it. You just had to pull it up.
I have a feeling I can't pull that up on stream. I have a feeling
Possibly not.
Possibly not. Let me pull that up on my phone real quick. I'm just gonna try and spell it how I heard it. Interesting. That's some of that interesting. Well, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. Thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
Oh, yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jayburn, who does not leave a comment. But Jayburn, thank you very much for the support and helping to keep those lights on, as always. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from XPenguin95, who says, hypothetically, if Russia started winning dramatically, in parentheses, not possible, but in your opinion, how would Russia's neighbors react, especially Poland and the Baltics? Slav Ukraine and Blia Putin.
The Poland and the Baltics would respond to that very badly. It would not be a neutral or positive response. It would be extremely negative. The reason being, well, actually, it doesn't really affect the Baltics much. The Baltics would be affected negatively because they are a part of the NATO alliance. So anything that's detrimental to the NATO alliance strategically, like Ukraine losing the war, is something they're going to respond to quite negatively. However, for Poland, it's a whole different story, because if Ukraine becomes a Russian-aligned country again, that means that the Russians are going to have military forces right on the Polish border, which means if a conventional war ever begins, instead of there being a buffer country in between them and the front lines, Poland is the buffer country in between everyone else on the front lines that would be there for a short while. So that's not really a good thing for the Polish. They're thinking about what that would mean for their economy in a war, how bad that would be, how many people they would lose. Look at the way the Russians conduct a war in Ukraine, and imagine that happening in Poland with the same kind of civilian casualties and everything else. It would be detrimental to the Polish economy. It would take a long time for them to recover once that war ended. Although the Russians, in all honesty, would probably be pushed out of Poland if they ever even pushed into it within a matter of a week or two, or several weeks. But still, the Polish would respond very negatively to the Russians taking over Ukraine, because the Polish would become the front lines of a conventional war ever began, and that's something that really no country ever wants to be in. The Ukrainians, however, want to be in that position because it's either they are the buffer zone in between Russia and NATO, or they are the buffer zone in between NATO and Russia. One or the other, and they would rather be aligned with much more successful economies where there is a market to grow than just being a part of Russia's friend of losers, well, group of losers, like Belarus and a couple of other countries like Iran and North Korea. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like you do make this stream possible, and you help us to keep this thing ad-free, sponsor-free, and every other kind of free we can. If it wasn't for folks like you, this channel would have never been possible, and I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and also having a really good question for us to answer as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from none other than Amarafati, who says, "Whoop," for a super chat of the night. And yes, he was.
Thank you so much for the support, Amarafati. Of course, Fushikon in disguise. But I do thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and being the first super chat of the night. You are racing to be the first super chat of the night every single night. And I got to thank you so much for that, because that support does help us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And the next one goes to Mr. Bit 10. Reminds me of Sheba, Mr. Bitten. But up next, anyways, we have a $5 super chat from Mr. Bitten, who says, "Honestly, security is better in Ukraine. An attempt on Zelensky isn't coming in the form of a missile, and Ukraine has the routine and structure in place."
I would say that it most likely won't be a missile attack. It will probably be something else, something a little less direct, like a bomb in the mail. You know, I wonder if Zelensky has a good bomb squad. But that's Andy knows what I'm talking about. But let's see. It will probably come in other means. Maybe even poisoning. That's a method that the Russians love to pull, is poisoning people. We don't really know. But I would say that the Ukrainian security is probably better than Russian security, because they have had an entire 434 days of pretty much continuous attacks for their security to improve on. And I have a feeling that they've greatly improved in drastic leaps ever since the beginning of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Junebug72, who puts in a $4 super chat and does not leave a comment. But of course, Junebug, thank you very much for being around for a very long time and always supporting the channel. And you know what I'm going to say, keeping those lights on. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support. We always have to correct this because someone actually brought it up and thought we were saying this literally. You do help us to keep the lights on figuratively, but we don't actually pay the electrical bill. We pay our parents' rent because we live in the basement. What's wrong about that? We live in the basement.
Whoa.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. A girl asked me, "Where do you live?" I said, "I live in my parents' basement." She never returned my calls. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Unless you're George Costanza, and you know that episode where like
he
went up to the women. Yeah, he went up to the women and said, "I live at home in my parents' basement. I have no money." And she said, "Oh, really?"
Hi, I'm Sandra. But I gotta say, I thank you so much once again for the support, because you help us to pay rent. You also help us to save up. Oh my God! Oh my God! Wait a minute, I think it came back.
It's going down.
Can you hear me, Matthew?
I can hear you now.
You wouldn't believe it. We actually got disconnected. The chat got disconnected as well, and somehow it's come back from the dead.
What?
It came back. I can't believe it. That's the first time ever that I've seen the thing completely flatline and somehow come back to life. First time ever in 434 days. So we're back. And so with that, I hope we answered that one fairly well. Thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And also, if y'all want to spite the bots, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to do that. We've gotten 1,667 likes tonight. Can we get that on up to 1,800? That's a good time in history. It's the Industrial Revolution. What's wrong with that? And so with that, we are on to the next one. And also, Philip Green said the stream went to crap. I would agree. And it came back. Where, we're going to build back better. We're going to stack spaghetti and all kids bouncing. And what happened? So with that, we're on to the next one.
Well, no, I won't say that. But up next, we have a $2 super chat from Dupper Bob, who says, "Love Ukraine." And of course, Heroem Slava. And thank you very much, Dupper, for the very consistent support as always. And we also have a $2 super chat from Slava Something, who says, "I assure you, I had nothing to do with the drone attack."
Interesting. Well, I thank you for the support. Interesting to hear that you had nothing to do with it. That's something that someone would say if they had something to do with it. But still,
Partisan.
Partisan. Partisano. No.
Partisan.
Oh, I forgot the Partisan song. But anyways, with that, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll make sure to vouch for you if it ever comes into question. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and we are out of super chat questions. So with that being said, we are moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoder of the stream. Decoders. We have JP's Gone Fishing. We also have Rumpelstiltskin, Cfay, Mark Hodges, Cliff Simonson, Dark Warrior 137, Paul Schultz, Earl Bernew, and also Slava Something. They said the Morse code reads, "The Kremlin attack is an embarrassment to the Russian government. Slava Ukraine and Slava LSE."
That's the sound of money. And y'all got that correct. Y'all have, in fact, hit the jackpot for the 434th day in a row. That is an embarrassment to the Russian government. No matter whether it was a false flag or a real deal or what, the fact that a drone blew up over the Kremlin is something else. Who would have ever believed that at some point in history, there would have been a drone or anything that would have blown up over the Kremlin? That is really crazy. The only thing that's ever gotten close to that is when a Soviet student pilot, well, actually, I'm sorry, no, it was a West German student pilot, flew his Cessna 172 all the way through the Baltic Sea and then over St. Petersburg and down towards Moscow and landed it on the Red Square right before the Soviet Union collapsed. That was about the only thing that came as close to this as being an embarrassment for the Russian air defenses. But that thing is certainly a national embarrassment, no question about it. And so with that, I hope we addressed the Morse code message fairly well. Thank you so much to all of our Morse code decoders for continuing to read off that message 434 days in. We get a new one every night, and y'all are always there reading it off. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, believe it or not, there's actually been a pretty major cyber attack in the U.S. right now. It looks like Dallas was hit by one. It looks like some other places might have been hit by it too. So we could be feeling like the aftershocks of a cyber attack with our connection issues, because our internet is all bars right now. It's like 5 bars on my computer. So I don't know what's up with that. Maybe we're experiencing that.
Man, our computer Wi-Fi, man, is all bars, just spitting out those bars.
Bars.
Man, relax and take notes while I take totes from the marijuana smoke.
Whoa.
You know that song?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
man.
I know. I sent you a meme with that song in it.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah, that's where I remembered it from. It was that seal thing from Alice in Wonderland, but it had that song playing over it, and the person who made the video edited it to where the thing was actually singing the song. It was actually really, really well made. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Dead Crow, who says the drone hitting the Kremlin. Camera person was waiting for the drone ? And apparently they knew it was coming.
I would say that it appears to me that all the cameras were actually mounted, kind of like live cameras. They weren't actually cameramen. So I would say that they probably didn't know the drone was coming, but the cameras caught it anyways because they were aimed at the building. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Angry Penguin said, Enforcer is always full of surprises. I mean, I guess. But one thing I always have to say, Angry Penguin, to statements like that is homeschool much? And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat. This one goes to Gulashnas, who puts in a $3 super chat. It says, -1 coffee for me and +1 doggo treat for the floofies.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Galashnians, for the support and getting a doggo treat for the corgis. I believe what they get are flower bones, spelled like this. Flower bones. Let's see, not
They're
these.
sold at Sam's Club.
Yeah, they're sold at the Sam's Club.
Oh, there, Bliet. Oh, darn.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh yes, I think we're up to speed now.
Oh, we're up to speed again.
Hey,
Second attack.
we're back.
2-0, baby. 2-0. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next question goes to Big Bliatman Boss, who says the FSB false flag, like the 1999 bombing in Moscow, ? Is this the same thing?
The 1999, let me pull this up because I actually haven't heard about this before. Bombing in Moscow. Russian apartment bombings. Series of killing more than 300, injuring more than 1,000. The bombings, together with the invasion, triggered the Second Chechen War. The handling of the crisis by Putin, who was prime minister at the time, boosted his popularity greatly and helped him to attain the presidency within a few months. Let's see. A suspicious device resembling those used by the bombings was found and defused in an apartment block in the Russian city of Ryazan. Let's see here. Let's see. The attacks were widely attributed to Chechen terrorists, although their guilt was never being conclusively proven. Some historians and journalists claim that the bombings were coordinated by Russian state security services to help bring Putin into the presidency. Others disagree with such theories or argue that there is insufficient evidence to assign responsibility for the attacks. So it is in the question if these things are Russian created or not. Honestly, the way that building collapsed, that building looks just like a building that would have been hit in Uman not too long ago. But anyways, to answer that question, I would say, at least reading it off the bat, it seems as though it is very similar to these kinds of attacks. Well, it's not killing as many people. It was an attack on a flagpole. Maybe this time they thought it would be a little bit too on the nose to repeat the same thing again. But it is crazy to see that these apartment buildings being blown up by supposed Chechen terrorists in 1999 was enough to start the Second Chechen War, but according to the Russians, whenever they do it to the Ukrainians, they're just hitting military targets, or it is just a part of war. That doesn't really make a lot of sense considering that this led them into a war almost a whole 23, 24 years ago. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Mad Machine, who says, did you know that Ukraine is making homemade rockets using World War II V-1 rocket technology as decoys to overcome the Orcs defense systems?
I think I have heard about that. I didn't include it in the news because we never got any actual, I believe, pictures of a flyable iteration of that. We got like a concept image of one, but it is a pulse jet kind of little system. And so to describe what a pulse jet is, the pulse jet is a very simple kind of propulsion system. It just has a combustion chamber, something's filled in it, it burns, and then it shoots out pretty much exhaust, and that exhaust gives it thrust. And then that thrust moves it forward. Some of y'all may remember when Colin Furs, I believe his name is, made the Pulse Jet go-kart that could go like 60 or 70 miles an hour, and it operates off of a very similar principle. So I did hear about that, and I think it is pretty interesting to see, because it looks like the Ukrainians are finally the ones picking up on what happened during the Nagorno-Karabakh War, when the Azerbaijanis, if I remember correctly, were the ones to use their Antonov 2s as drones to soak up the Armenian surface-to-air missiles and then send in their actual attack. And then the Armenians had no defense to it. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a question from JC the Music Man, who says, why were so many people filming the Kremlin at 3 a.m.?
They were live cameras, kind of like the ones that we see across Ukraine most of the time. So the reason why there were so many cameras focused on that building is because they were live cameras. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from, let's see here, William McCauley, who says, Matt, do you think that maybe they're probing their defense systems?
I don't know. Well, if you're talking about the drone attack on the Kremlin, I would say no, because they had already proven earlier when they flew the drone near the Kremlin that there was no defense systems there. And considering that they blew up their drone over the Kremlin, if anything, they're going to be certainly ensuring that the Russians will add on to their pre-existing defenses. So, if anything, they're going to make it far more difficult for future attacks to occur. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, I do have a poll that is about to go up here. Good question somebody brought up a minute ago, and let's see what y'all think. But our next question goes to Arfkey78, who says, which part would they push first, in your opinion? And would you push True Crimea first?
True Crimea first? Is that what he said?
I think he meant to say through Crimea first.
Yes, I would push through Crimea first, considering that Crimea is the whole reason Russia is fighting this war. If Crimea was taken, we could assume that they may give up Donbass relatively easily, considering there wouldn't really be any point in holding it anymore. So I would say yes, go through Crimea first. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, I see some folks saying that stuff is going down in Ukraine right now. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything major happening right now at the moment. There were some attacks about 3 hours ago, shortly after we started our stream. It was simply suicide drones. Nothing extraordinary. I have noticed a few more people repeating the claim that there might be some movement with nuclear stuff, but as of right now, that's still simply rumor and haven't seen any evidence to back that up. So maybe some folks simply got caught up in the rumor. But anyways, up next we have a question from 180 Dude 180, who says, do you think they bombed themselves so they don't have to have the victory parade?
That may be part of the reason, but that will have far-lasting implications beyond just canceling a parade, because the Russians and the Russian public seem to be taking that poorly, whatever happened with the drone, whoever caused it, and they're aiming all of their anger at the Ukrainians, which means that they'll probably do more than just cancel the parade, but that may be a reason for it. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have one from Greg Lankus, who says, it's my birthday. And also, happy birthday to you, Greg. He says, can y'all answer a question for me? Do you think after this war ends, Ukraine will adopt a second amendment? I'd donate if I could afford it.
And a happy birthday to you, Greg, first of all. Second of all, I don't know if Ukraine would provide some kind of a Second Amendment kind of law or an amendment to their constitution. I'm not really sure about that. This is a exceptional time of war, and so they were handing out guns to really anyone who wants one. We don't really know what happened to a lot of the rifles that they handed out to citizens at the start of the war. We don't really know if they kept them or if they turned them back into the Ukrainian government. We really don't know. But one thing I will say is that would be fairly interesting to see. A lot of countries around the world, really every country around the world, does not have gun laws like the United States. Really everyone else has far stricter gun laws that pretty much forbid normal citizens from owning guns or heavily restrict them. Like, for example, a lot of people say that the country of Switzerland actually requires that you have a gun in your house, a long rifle of a kind. And then they say that mass shootings in Switzerland or deaths by firearms are incredibly low. And that's because while they have the rifles at their house, they can't have ammunition at their house. They have to actually bring their rifle to a range and get the ammunition there, or currently be serving in the military to have access to ammunition. So that's why shootings there are low, because yes, while they have loads of guns, there's no ammo. And so it's pretty hard to conduct a mass shooting if you really have nothing to shoot with. Moving on into the whole Swiss thing. And I can't really talk about politics, as far as the Second Amendment goes. Of course, y'all know I own loads of guns. That's one of my hobbies. I love collecting them. I think they're really neat. But I can't really get into it much more than that. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And real quick, let's address this poll. The question is, will Zelensky be able to enter Ukraine safely, or will he need to stay abroad for some time? It looks like 90%, which is the overwhelming majority, said he will safely return and sneak in. 5% said unsure, and 5% said he needs to stay abroad for a while. And on this one, I'm actually going to be with the 5% that said he needs to stay abroad for a while. He actually has an engagement scheduled for May the 13th, I believe. And I would not be surprised if he stayed abroad up until that date. That is speculation on my part, but I think that would maybe be a smart move, because if he flies back in, there is the real possibility that Russia might try to down his plane or do something to him to take him out. Because right now the heat is very hot. And I think if he stays abroad for a little while, the heat will probably die down and the risk will also go down. But that's just my speculation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say he will safely return and probably just sneak back in, because it seems as though the Russians have never really been able to figure out when he's leaving Ukraine ever. And so they probably don't really know when he's actually going to be going back into Ukraine either. So you'll probably be able to get in there relatively safely. And on top of that, there's really no way they can precisely target Zelensky, even if they knew where he was in western Ukraine, because there will probably be a large amount of air defenses surrounding him, either aircraft in the air or air defenses on the ground along his route to make sure that he doesn't end up getting killed. So I would say he's probably going to return safely. I'd have to go with an 88% on that. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Anonymouse, who says, can the U.S. or allies do or provide Zelensky with anything to protect him better from Russian assassination? F-16s.
Yeah, F-16s. They can provide him with F-16s. I don't really know a lot about bodyguards or personal protection to really talk about that. But I could say that helping out the Ukrainian military by providing them great air superiority aircraft could probably help out in some way, shape, or form in protecting Zelensky and Ukrainian citizenry a little bit better. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Perry, who says, Ukraine announced a 58 hours curfew in Kherson starting on Friday. And do you think this might be the start of the counteroffensive?
It may be, may not be. Not entirely sure. Curfews have been called across the country before, sometimes just for safety reasons. So it's really hard to tell what that one is aimed for. It may be an offensive, may not be. Because calling a 58-hour curfew beforehand would be pretty much giving away that the offensive will be starting within 58 hours. Which would be a little, not really great for the element of surprise. But they may be doing it out of safety concerns. Who really knows? They didn't do that during the Kherson counteroffensive, though, or the Balaklia counteroffensive. It just happened. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dale Alaticus, who says, silly question, but I was curious as to what the Ukrainian trident means in their symbol.
So the Ukrainian trident is a very old symbol, way back from like the 10th or 9th century. And let me go find it real quick. Let's see here. The trident was not thought of as a national symbol until 1970, when one of the most prominent Ukrainian historians, Mikhailo Hrushevsky, proposed to adopt it as a national symbol, alongside other variants, including an arbalest, a bow, or a Cossack carrying a musket. And this one, the Cossack carrying a musket is actually a fairly common one. Images that carried considerable historical and cultural and heraldic significance for Ukraine. I can't get that word right. On the 25th of February of 1918, the Central Rada, which is the parliament of Ukraine, adopted it as the coat of arms of the short-lived Ukrainian People's Republic. And then during the Soviet period and independence between 1991 and 1992, the state symbols were consistent with the Russian SFSR and the Soviet Union, the hammer and sickle over the rising sun. But moving on, down here is the first iteration of the Ukrainian trident, which is the seal of Sviatoslav the Brave in 945. So this would be the 10th century AD. This is about the first time we ever saw the Ukrainian trident shown. Just 40 years later, the trident had made a great leap forward. This was actually the Srebrenik of Vladimir Sviatoslavich. And you can see right here, the Ukrainian trident actually made its first true form. And then since then, it has been used a little bit. It was used largely during the very early medieval era, and then it just kind of ceased to exist afterwards once the Mongols arrived, and then was brought back in 1918 as a symbol of Ukraine, and then in modern day again. The significance is really, it's really just in it being a historical symbol. I don't really know what it meant when it was originally used, but we'll see if we can find a reason. Also, there's the Cossack holding the musket, which is a very common one.
What's a Cossack?
So a Cossack is the traditional people that used to live in Ukraine during like the 16th to 18th centuries. They were a group of people who were largely poor folks from Poland and Russia that started to move south into Ukraine because Ukraine was largely unpopulated at the time. Because they never really recovered after the Mongol invasion, and they started to settle there and live there, and they started creating their own culture and their own systems, And while they were living technically within the Russian Empire, the Russians really exerted no control over these people for a very long time. And so they formed a little group. Well, actually, they formed multiple groups, but the largest one was the Zaporizhian Cossacks, which are still known to this day. And they had special kind of clothes, special kind of, like, once again, customs, traditions, so on. And largely, they were very, very free with very little governmental restrictions on them, unlike other areas around them, like the Russian Empire itself and Poland, Lithuania, which would collapse a little bit later on. They had a very independent lifestyle, kind of like what you would imagine the early United States to be like. That's kind of how the Cossacks lived.
I thought Cossack meant something a lot worse because that guy on Star Trek was always like cussing people out with it and everything. You know that guy, the Russian?
Well, yeah, Chekhov.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't get it wrong because they made the Russian in the show racist against Ukrainians. He would sit there and go, "You freaking Cossack!" Like honestly though, they got that like right on the nail, because even then, the Russians were fairly racist against the Ukrainians. They did not like the Ukrainians whatsoever. And what's interesting is that if you ever read the Ukrainian SFR SSR anthem, and I'll try and pull up the lyrics in English. What's interesting is that the Russians kind of had a great deal of inspiration, well, it gave the Ukrainians a great deal of quote-unquote inspiration writing their anthem, and you can see that it really does show up. Like, for example, right here, the Russian people were our brothers and friends. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. They put their boot on the Ukrainians throughout all of history whenever they could. And then in the lyrics, they want to sit there and tell the Ukrainians, oh, we're your friends. And remember, while the Ukrainians were singing this anthem from 1919 up until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, there was the Holodomor, where Stalin starved out Ukrainians and committed cultural genocide against them. Millions of them died from famine that was state-run. It wasn't just a natural famine. It was something that the Soviets did to them. And all that kind of stuff. And then they're singing a song about, the Russians are our friends. You know, it's like, no, they're not. They're not your friends. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Happy Dragon, who says, Enforcer, how did Russia not take out the first drone, and how could they have possibly come that close to the Kremlin in the first place?
Apparently, there's a non-existent no-fly zone, or those drones have been how do you say that, Matthew, in the correct
Jailbroken?
term? Yeah, jailbroken. Well, that's the way we'll say it. They've been jailbroken to where they don't recognize no-fly zones, and apparently no one really cares when drones fly near the Kremlin, at least up until now. And so those drones were able to get that
Are you
close.
talking about taking the geofencing off of it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But apparently nobody really cared that drones were flying that close to the Kremlin ever, and so that's how they were able to get that close, because I know one thing. There is, like, what was it called again? A geo-lock or something like that?
Geofencing.
There is geofencing. Let's just pull this up. Drone geofencing, Washington, D.C. Now let's see if there's a map of it. So let's see here. Let's see. Is divided into 15-mile radius inner ring, 30-mile radius outer ring. Flying an unmanned aircraft within the 15-mile radius inner ring is prohibited without specific FAA authorization. So pretty much anywhere in the District of Columbia, even if it's, like, let's see, let's govern within a 30-mile radius of the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, which restricts all flights in the greater D.C. area. So, if we go to Washington, D.C., over here, and we go to the
Washington.
Washington. Washington. If we go right here, here is the Reagan International Airport. It will pop up right there. There we go. So 15 miles out, you can't fly a drone. So that means, and our stream is lagging again, but we're just going to keep going. That means 15 miles out. Dang, man, that's far, actually.
Damn, son.
That's 15 miles out. So you cannot fly a drone anywhere that close to the Ronald Reagan International Airport. In fact, that no-fly zone goes all the way out outside of the District of Columbia, almost halfway to Baltimore, if you put it this way. Hell, that is, well, really more like a third of the way to Baltimore, but you can't get anywhere near anything in Washington, D.C. flying a drone. It's completely impossible. And the fact that the Russians had no restrictions on where drones could fly at all, and no eyebrows were raised when that video came out a while ago of a Ukrainian drone, or supposedly a Ukrainian partisan drone flying right near the wall of the Kremlin, that is pretty wild. That's pretty insane, and a massive I guess you could say, failing of the Russians to either find the drone and cause a problem about it before it did that, or to allow them to even fly that close at all. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what we know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And Seaface says, what part of the Kremlin got blown up?
All of our food keeps blowing up. But let me go back. And what got hit and blown up is the flagpole on top of the Snetsky Dvorets building, which is this building right here. So it was this flagpole on this dome. Some people have been coming in tonight and, of course, getting very militant about the title. One thing that people just never get, I don't know why, is that we have a word limit on how many words can be in our title. So I can't sit there and go, Russian flagpole hit, or Russian flagpole blown up, because I passed the character limit, so I can't do that. So I have to sit there and go, Kremlin blown up, because it gets the point across that something blew up in the Kremlin, and then Putin hides. I've seen a couple of people coming, it's clickbait, I'm done! And it's like, it's not, because something blew up on the Kremlin. You know, it's like, I can't help that there's a character limit, because I have to put in the whole thing, current Ukraine war footage and news with the Enforcer, and then the day every single night. And so I only have a limited character list to work with. I have like 20, 25 characters to work with, and I have to make a title that fits within that. So, you know, there you go. And also, Marcia Tugger said, drones hit Kremlin. I'm going to try that one real quick, because right now, this is at 95 words. So let me type that in. Let's see. Drones. One second. Drones hit Kremlin. Actually, that does work. We're going to save that. We're going to change the title. There we go. Now people will be happy. And then Enhance said, nothing got blown up. Well, I'd say that flagpole got blown up. Because if I watched, there was a mushroom cloud that came off of that thing. But there we go. We changed it. Thank you, Marcia Tucker, for coming up.
Now, if it said Kremlin destroyed, that would be one thing. Drones hit the Kremlin or Kremlin blown up. It's true. It's facts. But this is a little bit more accurate, I will say.
It is a little bit more accurate. Eater of Tears said most of YouTube is clickbait. Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, like, you know, I don't know if people know this or not, but titles have a lot to do with videos. You know, you have to have a somewhat decent title, and also on top of that, once again, working with a character limit. So you have to figure out how to try and get the point across in a limited amount of letters. So, you know, I can't really go and write out the whole news like segment for 3 hours in the title because it won't fit. But there we go. We have
and also we are trying to drag in more people, because the more people we can drag in, the more people that can support Ukraine.
And that's true. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Jason Koslow, who says, Enforcer, do you think it was the firefighters climbing the pole to put out the fire that they knew was coming?
I would say they're probably not Ukrainian firefighters, because there was no fire at that point, from what we could tell, anywhere on the building. And I would have to say, I'm trying to think. Nah, they weren't firefighters. I don't know who they were and why they were up there, but they were going up there for something. I would have no idea what it would be. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Anonymous, who says, we aren't seeing a wealth of detailed analysis from the drone attack from credible government sources. Why? Are people like the U.S. State Department holding back and waiting? And I can actually answer that one.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Matthew.
So apparently, the U.S. government got caught off guard by the events that happened today in Russia. The U.S. government is not sure whether or not to believe Ukraine or to believe Russia at this point. They said that they haven't found any evidence to corroborate Russia's position, but they also can't support Ukraine's position fully either, because Ukraine didn't inform them or tell them anything beforehand that something was going to happen. Also, apparently, we didn't have any intel coming from Russia that they were going to try to do a false flag attack either. So we were completely blindsided, according to the official story. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with that for the large part. And on top of that, we also don't have a lot of information about the drone attack here in the United States, so it's really hard for us to come up with a story unless we were just making one up. All we really have right now to go off of is video footage and picture evidence. And so with that, I hope we address that fairly well while I make sure we're not lagging. And with that, we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Mr. Attitude, who says, "Did you guys hear about the cholera breakout in the Russian area in the south?"
Whoa, hey, watch it with the attitude. I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
I'm just kidding. But I heard about the anthrax breakout. I didn't hear about the cholera breakout. Now that one would be new. So with that, I hope I answered that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Rodney Burns, who says the drone attack on Kremlin looks like a false flag attack. And do you think they will use it as a pretense to attack Zelensky or use a tactical nuke, as they clearly cannot win in Ukraine?
I would have to say that a tactical nuke for what the Ukrainians supposedly did, according to the Russians, would be overkill, considering that no real damage was caused to the Kremlin. It was a huge embarrassment for them, yes, but I don't think that requires them to go and start throwing nukes at people. That would kind of be like 9/11 happening, and then we glass of the Middle East, just nuke the whole thing. That is a little bit, and not to say that 9/11 wasn't a tragedy and didn't require a response, but that would be overkill for that situation. I would say that we're probably not going to see them nuke Ukraine, but they certainly will do something, most likely a missile attack or something else. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Born in Ukraine, who says, "Do you think Zelensky's trip was scheduled or act to the U.S. statement / intel / attack warning in Kyiv? Coincidence? And thanks."
Can you reread that one again? What happened? Reread the line.
Born in Ukraine says, "Do you think Zelensky's trip was scheduled or act to the U.S. statement intel / attack warning in Kyiv? And coincidence? Thanks."
I think it was scheduled because while it always is supposedly secret, these things do have to be planned out. Zelensky can't just leave Ukraine because he has to leave and go to Poland to then fly because they are not flying him out of Ukraine. If he is being flown out of Ukraine, it's by helicopter, and then they drop him off at the border, or they fly him across the border into Poland, and then he hops on a plane and goes from there. So I would have to say that he is... that was most likely planned because they would have to, of course, communicate with the Poles to let them know they were going to Poland and then communicate with the other countries they were traveling to. Because these are state meetings and there does have to be room made in schedules for these meetings to occur. So I would say that this was most likely planned in advance, and the fact that the attack happened was either cunning planning on the Ukrainians' end, or if we were going with their official story, was mere coincidence. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Judy Wilson, who says, "Is Ukraine getting any money aid to help pay for weapons and their men?"
And can you reread that one again? What happened? My brain is slipping. My butt's been wiped.
Wow. Is Ukraine getting any money aid to help pay for weapons and their men?
Yes, they are. They are getting a decent amount of money aid from a lot of countries. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And Mandy, why in the world is it sometimes when I say things like that, you go, "Oh my." It's like, what? Man. But anyways, with that, we are on.
I don't know.
Man, I don't know. But with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, tomorrow's title for the stream is going to be "Ukraine destroys Russian activists, gets banned for spitting straight fire."
You know what tomorrow's title is gonna be? Simply clickbait. It's gonna be like Simply Watermelon or something like that. Like the juice. It's gonna be Simply clickbait.
The juice.
Man, we're gonna be getting those titles down. I'm telling you, straight clickbait. That's what it's gonna be. Straight clickbait. That's what I'm gonna say. It's straight clickbait. I'd say it totally is. I'd agree with them completely. And I would
Let me go ahead and set this straight though, real quick though. I don't say no, "Oh my," like George Takaya says it. I don't do that. I don't know where they first came up with that.
Well, when you sit there and go, "Wow," I mean, like that. That to me, it comes off like a "oh my."
That's a lot different. "Oh wow," than "oh my."
I mean, that's true, but still, "oh my." But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and we have a question from Happy Dragon, who says, "Are you gentlemen taking a vacation with your family this summer before you start law school?" And I sure hope so, because once we start law school, it's over for vacations. So I do hope so, but I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen. But Enforcer, what say you?
No. No, it's probably not happening. I hate to say it, but if the stream is running, it's probably not happening. There's no way I can run this stream outside of this house, because I have a whole entire setup with 2 monitors. There's really no place we can go where I can do this effectively. And also with how our family travels, like if we are going from point A to point B, it's like 12 hours. And so by the time we get somewhere, it would be time for me to run the show. And there would be no time for me to do all of the pre-stream prep and set all this up again to be able to do it. So the chances of me being able to do this and go on vacation are slim to none. So I'd have to cancel this thing for a whole week and then go on vacation. And I have a feeling it would probably be better for us to keep this thing running than to go on a week's vacation. But, you know, we'll just
Or
have to
what
see.
we'll do is we'll leave the enforcer behind here at the house. We'll go, and I'll simply do it from my laptop down there at the beach.
Maybe. But, you know, who knows? But with that, and also, Matthew, thank you for doxing yourselves on that vacation by saying you're going to the beach. That really narrows it down. But with that, I hope...
How's that doxing? There's like beaches everywhere. There's a whole like coastline, east, west, south.
Someone from Alabama is certainly going to go swimming in Oregon. Yes. I see that happening here in the future. Yes, of course.
Come meet me down in Destin, Russians. Come out and fight like a man.
Come out, you black and tans. Come out and fight me like a man. Show us how your wife won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the Niceville people rage and run like hell away from the green and lovely lanes of Destin Fort Walton. What the hell is this called, Destin Fort Walton? Why not just pick one? It's on the Fort Walton side. Just call it Fort Walton.
I'm gonna broadcast from the water.
Man, you gonna buy me a boat? Oh, wait a minute, is this?
Yeah.
This is Crab Island, man. Dude, I hear they got crabs down there.
Listen, folks. We took a rental boat from this little marina area over here, showing the marina right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like showing the marina, like, you know, zoom in and show them that.
Yep, right here. Yep.
Yeah, we rented a pontoon boat from over here, and we decided we're going to be bold and daring and take the thing out into this like channel right over here. The water was a lot more vicious than we thought, and we almost sunk the pontoon. It was taking on water, and we had to like take an emergency exit to that sandbar over there on the left. And dock the thing because we almost sunk it. Like it was taking on water and it was like sagging all the way back to the dock.
The captain wired in, he had water coming in, and the good ship and crew was in peril. But really though, he's not kidding. One of the waves was so bad that the boat flipped up, like from the bow, it flipped up, and then it went down into the water. And it didn't come back up. Like, the bow just kept on going into the water, like a quarter of the boat. Even, like, the front row of seats was completely submerged, and finally it came back up. Like, the boat almost capsized, really, and we were about to go down with that thing in the middle of this jetty. But we were honestly scared as hell. At that point, we're like, turn the thing around, let's go back. We're about to die. Because...
Man, I was ready to jump in the water at that point.
Man, we couldn't even swim when we were that old.
I had a life jacket on.
Hell, man, you think that was going to help me? No, man, I'm drowned. But anyways, with that, I hope y'all enjoyed that small story from our lives. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from John Robinson, who says, is Russia using the T-14 tank in Ukraine?
No, they are not, because the T-14 is mired with technical issues. It's never been usable. All of their tanks are pretty much prototypes, and the production series ones are also having a large amount of problems, and they've never really been ironed out. So we'll probably never see them used in Ukraine, and if we do, it's going to be a desperate time for the Russians if they have to pull those terrible lemons out. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from the Bad Jelly, who says, just wondering if any T-54s or T-55s have been seen on the front line yet, and thanks.
T-54s and T-55s, we have seen them on the front lines, and they've already even been captured by the Ukrainians as well. So to answer that question, yes. And so with that, hope I answered it. We're on to the next one.
And the next one is going to go to Jason Kozlow, once again. Do you believe that anyone thought that that small explosion on a huge building like that would have any chance of actually harming Putin? And why didn't it hit the building instead? And the 2 people were firefighters.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Didn't know they were firefighters. Interesting here, they were climbing up there where there was no fire, but still pretty interesting. I would say that the drone hit the flagpole because it was supposed to be a symbolic thing or a superficial thing, one or the other. We don't really know which it was, and I would honestly lean more towards superficial, because if it's a Russian false flag, they would, of course, go for something that wouldn't really mean anything, like trying to hit that flagpole, which really did nothing. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, could drones have flown fast to punch through the tiles on the dome? Excuse me. And could the charge/flash be incendiary to start a fire inside the dome after punching through? Applied logic.
It could be, but the fact that it was in a shallow flight path where it flew over the dome and past the flagpole shows that there was no intent to punch through the dome. Otherwise, it would have been aimed at it. Yes, all those things do seem to make sense, but apparently its flight path and the way it exploded certainly showed that that was not the plan. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And we actually only have one more, so it's up to you if you'd like to do that last little thing.
And so, who is the lucky last person who asked the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is DDK. And also thank you, folks, for saying bless you. And DDK says, not a Ukraine war ? But curious of enforcer opinion. Iran has thousands of shahed drones and are for a U.S. carrier group in a swarm attack with only 100 missiles for defense. Are they really a threat?
No, they are not that much of a threat, in my opinion. You have to remember that a carrier task force would be surrounded by frigates and destroyers that have multiple close-in weapon systems on them. They would probably just use those to comb the entire area where the shahed swarm is flying in, shooting down almost all of them, and then taking out the rest. Well, most likely engaging them in force at a distance, with a few of the surface-to-air missiles, and then once they started to get close enough, use the CIWS to take out the rest of them. I don't really think they could pose that much of a problem, and on top of that, the explosive force of a shahed is quite small, so it probably wouldn't cause enough damage to actually take down a carrier, even if multiple of them hit one. But it would definitely cause damage, probably moderate damage at best. So I don't really think they were that much of a threat, to be honest with you. And I highly doubt that the United States would really allow something like that to happen, considering that a swarm like that would certainly be visible on radar, considering that a single shahed is visible on radar. So with that, I hope that does address the final question of the night. And believe it or not, we actually were able to address every single live chat we got tonight. That was actually crazy, and I hope y'all enjoyed that as well, because that was rare. But still, thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy the stream, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to put a thumbs up, and make sure to share this channel with your friends. If you enjoy being here, I'm sure they'd enjoy being here too. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, and I'll see you all then. And of course, Slava Ukraini.
And a good night. And if you can't take it, don't dish it. You got that, Putin?
You gotta tell me how she got
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим
душу свою.